After Dad died, everything in our lives folded in on itself, like one of the cardboard models I used to make as a kid. You can try to glue the corners, brace the weak spots, but sooner or later the whole thing just buckles. Mom couldn't afford the house in Henderson anymore. Within a month, we were shoving our entire lives into the back of a rented U-Haul, heading northwest to a place called Brookings, Oregon. All I knew was that it sat near the ocean and got more rain than sun. Our new home was a cramped duplex near the highway. 2 small bedrooms, floors that groaned with every step, and a heater that clicked like it was thinking about warming up before finally bothering. Mom worked constantly, day shifts cleaning offices straight into night shifts at the Redwood Motel. That left me and Jenna, my cousin, to manage everything else. She dropped out of college in California after some mix of burnout and a bad roommate situation. I didn't push for details. She came to help us, but I think she needed the change just as much. Jenna was 23, dressed almost exclusively in ripped jeans and flannels, and said "my guy" like it was a comma. She was the only person who really talked to me since the move, so I didn't mind. Most days I hid out in my room. I built tiny things out of whatever I could scavenge: models, makeshift robots, towers from toothpicks and glue. My closet overflowed with supplies: wires, cardboard, plastic lids, broken toys, stripped motors from old RC cars. That Saturday morning, Jenna leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, eyeing the chaos. "You need to organize this crap before it comes alive and eats you," she said. "It's organized in my head," I mumbled. "Yeah? Unless your brain's got shelves, we need a box. Big one." We tried Walmart. The ones that would work cost $25, which may as well have been $100. Later, Jenna sat on the couch scrolling CRAIGSLIST like she was on a stakeout. "Nope, too far, sketchy. Ooh, this guy's selling a 50-gallon tote for $5. She clicked the ad. One grainy photo, big, blue, dusty. Seller's name was Dennis. Description said, "lightly used, ideal for storage." She messaged him. He replied in 20 minutes. Said we could meet Sunday evening, 7:40 p.m., at the back entrance of Safeway on Oregon Street. Not the front lot, the back where the trucks unloaded. Jenna frowned. Bit weird, but public enough. She pointed a finger at me. "You stay in the car, my guy. I'm serious. People are... people." That Sunday, clouds hung low over town. The air smelled of wet pavement and pine needles. We pulled into the back lot. Empty, except for one white van, crookedly parked, no markings. The back doors were shut. A man stepped out a minute later. Gray sweatshirt, baggy jeans. The way he moved, stiff knees, arms hanging too loose, set my skin on edge. Jenna got out and waved. "You the ones for the tote?" he asked. "Yep, you got it." He nodded, opened the van. Inside, tools, gas cans, a rusted lawnmower, a stack of Rubbermaid totes. Nothing illegal, but nothing right either. Leaning forward, I spotted something in the shadows. Shoes. Kids' shoes. Not one pair. At least 5. Different sizes, shoved against the wall like trash. I texted Jenna fast. "Don't go in. Shoes in the van." She glanced at her phone mid-sentence, then straightened. "We're good, actually. Not big enough. Thanks, though." Dennis just stood there. "It's 50 gallons, says on the label." "Yeah, just not what we're after," Jenna said, stepping back. Then he tilted his head. "Didn't you say your cousin's name was Milo?" She hadn't. Not once. Jenna turned, got in, locked the doors. I heard her breath hitch as she started the engine. "He was watching us before we even pulled in," she said. We didn't speak the rest of the drive. Back at the duplex, the porch light flickered and buzzed like it always did. Jenna got out first, scanning the street both ways. I followed close, adrenaline still humming in my veins. Inside, we locked the door twice and shut every blind. She paced the living room while I sat on the couch, clutching a throw pillow like armor. "You okay?" I asked. "No," she said flatly. "When I messaged him, I never mentioned you. That guy knew your name, Milo. How?" I didn't have an answer. We decided not to tell Mom. She'd panic, quit one of her jobs, and we'd be back to counting cans of soup for dinner. Jenna kept insisting it was probably a fluke, a creepy guy with a lucky guess. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded sharper. Once I swore I heard gravel crunch outside my window. I told myself it was the neighbor's cat. Morning came gray and still. Across the street, Gloria Whitman, our elderly neighbor, was already outside, watering her dead roses with a green plastic jug. She didn't talk much, but she saw everything, like a human security camera that never shut off. I used to think Gloria was just nosy. Now, I kind of appreciated her. That evening, just as the sky turned dusky purple, there was a knock at the door. Jenna checked the peephole, then cracked it open. Gloria stood there in a pink bathrobe and foam slippers, hair in curlers, flashlight tucked under one arm. "You folks expecting someone?" she asked. Jenna frowned. "No, why?" "I seen a man in your backyard. Twice now, just standing by the trees. Thought you ought to know." I swear I felt the blood drain from my arms. Jenna's voice tightened. "When?" "Last night, and just now. Might have been the same fella. Kinda hunched, gray sweatshirt. Didn't look like he belonged." "Did you call anyone?" Jenna asked. Gloria squinted. "Figured I'd tell you first, but I will if he comes back." After she left, Jenna went room to room, locking every window. Then she pulled Mom's old baseball bat from the closet and leaned it by the front door. We called the police. They showed up half an hour later, 2 officers. One walked the yard while the other asked questions. "Could be a deer," one of them said, glancing toward the highway. "Or someone passing through?" "Sure," I thought. "Passing through our backyard." Jenna just nodded. "Thanks." The next day at school felt like walking through a fog. I kept checking behind me, certain someone was following. Every time a teacher called my name, my chest tightened. Not because it was strange to hear it, but because now I wondered who else knew it. When I got home, Jenna was at the stove making boxed mac and cheese. She didn't say much. Her eyes were puffy like she hadn't slept. We ate in silence while a muted reality show flickered on the TV. At 9:13 p.m., the doorbell rang. We both froze. Jenna mouthed, "Don't move." She crept to the peephole, then turned and whispered, "No one's there." The bell rang again, twice, quick. Jenna yanked open the door, bat in hand. The porch was empty. In the middle of the welcome mat sat a Rubbermaid tote, dull blue, 50-gallon label still on it in faded marker. Closed. No note. "Don't touch it," I said, backing away. Jenna scanned the street. No footsteps, no engine noise. Nothing. She called the police again. This time a younger officer came. He peeked inside the tote. It was empty and shrugged. Could be a prank. Happens sometimes to new folks. Neither of us believed that. That night, Jenna shoved the tote into the garage wearing gloves, then dragged a folding chair into my room. She said she didn't trust her own. Too close to the trees. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting. Wednesday passed quietly, until I went to check the mail around 5:30 p.m. A piece of yellow string was tied tight around the handle. Not tape, not a tag, just string, knotted like it was meant to be noticed. I didn't touch it. I ran inside. Jenna didn't say a word, just exhaled, took a photo, and after a long pause, said, "We need to go." She messaged Mom, said we were going to the library. Instead, we drove across town and parked in the high school lot. Jenna's hand rested on the bat. "I keep thinking," she said finally. "What if he wrote down the plate that night? Or took a picture? What if he's done this before?" "What if he has?" I said quietly. She didn't answer. At 7:02 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You forgot your box." Jenna stared at the screen, then blocked the number and shut the phone off. "I'm reporting this again, and we're leaving this weekend." We didn't go home until almost 10. Gloria was still on her porch, flashlight in hand. "Cops came while you were out," she said. Told me to tell you. They found footprints in the mud by your fence. Not fresh, but not old either. We stayed up all night, every light on. Jenna patrolled the windows with the bat, slow and restless. Saturday morning, she packed a duffel bag. Told Mom we were going to stay with a friend in Crescent City for a few days. Somewhere with more people. Somewhere. He wasn't. I packed my backpack with clothes and model parts. As we backed out, I spotted a white van across from Gloria's house. No driver, no movement, just there. Don't look, Jenna said, turning sharply. Keep your head down. In Crescent City, we stayed with one of her old college friends. Bare mattress, dishes in the sink, but it felt safe. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, Mom called, panicked. There was a break-in, back window smashed. Nothing stolen. Police think it was kids. We knew better. When we got home, the tote was gone from the garage. But Jenna had kept everything. Photos, the ad, the messages, the picture of the shoes in the van. She printed them and tucked them into a manila folder labeled, "In case something happens." A month passed with no sightings, no texts, no boxes. But I checked every parked van, every alley. I never opened the door without knowing who it was. That feeling when something feels wrong? That's not paranoia. That's survival. And no bargain, no storage box, no deal is worth ignoring it. Long before I was standing in a Wendy's parking lot clutching 85 crumpled dollars in my sweaty palm, I was someone who still honestly believed life had a way of straightening itself out. Not because I was naive, God knows I wasn't, but because I was stubborn. I held on to hope the way some people grip pride, too tightly, until it leaves marks you can't hide. For 5 years, I'd worked at the same call center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. The pay covered the bills, and I could sleep at night without wondering if my debit card would decline in the morning. Then April came with reduced hours. May followed with a complete layoff. By June, every time I checked my bank account, the number staring back at me made my chest tighten like I'd swallowed something sharp. That's when my son's laptop died. The old school owner Chromebook, half the keys shiny from overuse, finally gave up after limping through the spring semester. Jaime needed it for his summer learning program. He was 10, quiet, thoughtful, always hunched over a notebook filling it with tiny sketches and strange little stories. He loved technology, hated crowds, and hated asking for help, especially from me. "I can do it on my phone," he said when I told him the Chromebook was toast. His voice was flat, like he'd already decided not to make a fuss. "You can't write stories on a phone, baby," I told him. "I can try." He shrugged, eyes on the floor, already pretending to be older than he was. That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone on the couch scrolling Craigslist. My cousin Sierra's voice played in my head. "They got killers and scammers on there, Tash. People getting kidnapped over TVs and couches. You want your picture on the news for a laptop?" I'd laughed at her warning when she said it, not because it was funny, but because I didn't have any other choice. Craigslist wasn't the last resort, it was the only resort. I found the ad at 1:07 a.m. HP Pavilion laptop, light use only, $85, factory reset, comes with charger, perfect for student use. The pictures made it look clean. The listing said pickup was in Monroe. When I messaged, the seller, Chris G., replied within minutes. "Still available. Moving to Tallahassee tomorrow. Can meet at Wendy's on P. 3:15 p.m. When I told Sierra, she immediately said, "I'm coming with you." 2 days later, I was gripping my purse so tight my fingers ached, trying not to sweat through my shirt in the Wendy's parking lot. Jaime sat in the back seat, kicking his feet against the floor mat, while Sierra scanned the lot with the kind of side-eye that could peel paint. The guy pulled up right on time in a dusty gray Nissan with tinted windows. He stepped out in a red t-shirt and jeans, shaved head, sunglasses on like he was still hiding from someone. "Y'all here for the pavilion?" he asked, holding a black laptop sleeve like it was nothing important. "That's us," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. Sierra stayed silent, leaning against the passenger door with her arms crossed, her gaze locked on him. Jaime stared through the window, studying Chris's face like he was trying to run it through some kind of mental background check. Chris opened the sleeve, pulled out the laptop, black, thin, unremarkable, but not suspicious. He powered it on. The screen lit with the Windows logo. Battery said 93%. Used it for online classes during COVID, he said. Factory reset last week. Just need the cash. Moving out tonight. You got the charger? I asked. Without hesitation, he handed it over. Standard plug. Not frayed, not sketchy. He even plugged it into his car's inverter to show it charging. You can test it out more if you want, he offered. That's when Sierra finally spoke. Why you selling it so cheap? Chris gave a quick laugh. Ain't got time to play price games, just trying to clear stuff out fast. It was a solid answer. I counted out the money, 5 20s, a 10, and a 5. He didn't even check it, just shoved it into his pocket. Y'all take care, he said, stepping back and nodding once before sliding into the driver's seat. The Nissan rolled away with a dusty screech. I looked at Sierra. Well? I still don't trust it, she muttered. But it boots. And he didn't try anything stupid. Hope it helps your kid. Now let's get out of here. Jaime cradled the laptop like it was glass the whole ride home. That first night he opened it before he even took his shoes off. The first 2 days were golden. Jaime figured out how to install his favorite writing program all by himself. Even found a free typing tutorial online and started practicing. By the end of the first night, he'd written a short story, 10 full pages, about a lonely robot who wanted to be a poet. I sat at the kitchen table, watching him at the desk in the corner, his shoulders hunched over the keys, eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in months. It reminded me of when he was little, the way he'd light up from the inside over something that mattered to him. You okay, Mom? He asked that night after dinner, catching me watching him. Yeah, baby, I said, smiling. Just happy. By the second night, he was back to emailing his cousin, trading weird memes, and falling down rabbit holes about black holes and Mars rovers. For the first time in a long while, I thought maybe Craigslist wasn't so bad after all. Maybe people like Chris were just trying to get by like the rest of us. Then came day 3. I was folding laundry in my room when Jaime came out of his, moving slowly. He was holding the laptop with both hands like it might break if he breathed wrong. His face was pale. Mom? His voice was quiet. What is it? It just shut off, then came back. Now it's asking for something. BitLocker recovery key? I frowned. What's that mean? He turned the screen toward me. A plain blue background, white letters across the top. Enter BitLocker recovery key to unlock this drive. We tried rebooting, same screen. I grabbed my phone and Googled it. Looks like it's some kind of security thing, tied to an account, I said slowly. Can we call him? Jaime asked. It says the key's tied to the original owner's Microsoft account. I tried the number Chris had used. Disconnected. I checked his Craigslist profile. Gone. We drove to a local computer shop. The tech, skinny college kid with bitten nails, looked at the screen and sighed like he'd seen this 100 times. Yeah, you're locked out, he said. Happens a lot. People sell corporate or stolen laptops and the system doesn't flag it until later. Recovery key's only available to whoever first set it up. How much to fix? I asked. Maybe $150, but no guarantees. I didn't even have 50. Jaime didn't cry. He just nodded, closed the lid, and handed me the laptop like it was already dead. We didn't say a word the whole ride home. Sierra called that night. I told her what happened. We should have checked more, she snapped. Made him log in, show ID, something. Damn, we were too trusting. I just wanted it to be real, I said. The line went quiet. 3 weeks passed. I worked late braiding hair, took extra DoorDash shifts, skipped lunch more than once. I dug out an old Kindle tablet and tried to load Jaime's writing software on it. It was slow, clunky, but he made it work. He always made do. Then, one Tuesday, Sierra texted me a screenshot. Craigslist ad, Dell XPS, light use only, $90. Moving to Savannah tomorrow. Can meet at Wendy's lot. Different name, different photos, same exact wording, same scam. I stared at the screen for a long time, not sure if I was angrier at Chris or at myself. I'm reporting it, Sierra wrote. I didn't stop her. But even if they caught him, my money was gone. Jaime's summer program was nearly over. We'd missed our shot. Sometimes when I open my closet, I still see the laptop tucked under a stack of towels, a little monument to what happens when hope meets hustle and gets caught in the middle. I haven't thrown it out. Not because I can't let go, but because I don't want to forget what it cost me and what it taught me. I've learned to ask more questions, to trust my gut even when it's inconvenient, to check serial numbers, to make sellers log in, to get receipts, even in a parking lot. I've learned that when you're broke, every offer feels like a lifeline. But sometimes that rope is tied to a hook. I don't hate Chris G. I don't even know if that's his real name. Maybe he needed the money like I did. Maybe he didn't care who he hurt. Doesn't matter. What matters is what I do next. 3 months later, I saved enough to buy Jaime a refurbished laptop from a certified store. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. He's writing again, says he wants to make video games someday. I told him he can do anything as long as he keeps his eyes open. That's the moral, I think. Hope isn't bad, but hope without caution, that's how people fall. And next time, I'll bring more than cash and company. I'll bring questions. I'll bring proof. Because the world doesn't owe you fairness. Sometimes it only gives you lessons. I'd always been drawn to things with history. Frames with chipped gilt corners, hand-painted teacups, anything that felt like it had been loved enough to survive. My grandmother used to say, anything that lasts a lifetime carries a bit of a soul. I never knew if she meant it literally. But after Drew and I split, I clung to that thought like it was a lifeline. I wanted things that felt steady, things that wouldn't walk out. I moved into the Santa Rosa rental in late September, a little half-duplex tucked behind a row of walnut trees, scuffed hardwood floors underfoot, a porch swing that groaned when no one sat on it. It was quiet, and it was mine. After 3 years of sharing a cramped one-bedroom with a man who made me feel like I occupied too much air, even silence felt like a luxury. Of course, freedom costs money, and freelancing as an interior designer in a slow season meant my budget for furnishing the place was just shy of non-existent. No West Elm, no Pottery Barn. Most mornings I sat cross-legged on my floor mattress with coffee, scrolling Craigslist for second-hand pieces that didn't look like they came with a curse. That word, haunted, lodged in my head the morning I saw it. The ad read, antique mirror, $80, must pick up tonight. The photos were grainy, but the piece itself was striking. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with a dark oak frame carved into vines and lilies. Art Nouveau by the look of it. The kind of thing you might find leaning behind the counter of an old apothecary. I'd never afford it new. The seller listed herself as Mara J. Her reply to my message came fast. Still available. Must pick up tonight. Bring help. Heavy. Cash only. That part made me pause. Craigslist sellers were usually casual, even forgetful. This felt urgent. But the price was right, and I hadn't bought myself anything beautiful since moving in. I asked for the address. Red Creek Road. Past mile marker 42, white mailbox, long gravel driveway. The name tugged at something in my memory, though not pleasantly. That stretch of road wasn't quite in town and not quite out, a liminal place. I hesitated, then did what women do before meeting strangers in isolated spots. I made a plan. I texted my sister. Going to pick up a mirror, little outside town. I'll text when I'm home. Her reply came quick. If it smells like murder, leave. I laughed out loud. half nervous, half amused, but still slipped my pepper spray and flashlight into my tote. By 6:30 I was on the road, a crisp 20 folded in my front pocket. The sun was bleeding into the hills as I left town behind. Quiet roads bordered by vineyards, barns slouching into themselves. Beautiful in that eerie California countryside way where the silence feels like it's listening. When I reached the bent white mailbox, its metal warped like it had been struck by a truck, I wasn't laughing anymore. The gravel drive coiled through trees whose leaves were too thick for the season, branches knitting overhead and dimming the light. My headlights seemed to dissolve into the shadows. Just when I considered turning back, the woods broke open into a clearing. A one-story house sat there, post-war construction, paint flaking in pale curls. A single porch light glowed faintly, insects orbiting it. No cars, no movement. I parked slow. The trees felt too close, leaning in, curious. I texted, "Here." No reply. The front door opened and a man stepped out. Overalls, denim jacket, gray at the temples but not old. His frame was solid. Someone who split logs for fun. He just stared until I rolled my window down. "You here for the mirror?" His voice was flat, unblinking. "Yeah," I said. "Is Mara here?" "She's inside," he answered. "I'm her brother, Wade." The temperature seemed to drop in that instant, the air sharpening against my skin. Still, I got out, because I didn't want to be rude, because the mirror was a steal, because fear is easier to ignore than to show. The porch steps moaned under my boots. Wade didn't widen the door, just turned and walked in. He expected me to follow, and I did, though every nerve in my body was whispering, "Don't." The smell hit me first, damp wood and old carpet left to mildew. Not overwhelming, but enough to register. Inside, a single bare bulb dangled from the living room ceiling, its faint flicker accompanied by a low buzz. No rugs, no curtains, just yellowed walls and uncovered windows. Furniture amounted to a folding chair and a crooked side table. Not lived in, just occupied. Recently. "She's in the back," Wade said without looking at me, pointing to a hallway that stretched farther than seemed possible for the house's size. I lingered near the doorway. "Is Mara okay?" "She's resting. Long day." His voice had no edges, like it was read from a page. "You ready? Mirrors set up for you." I swallowed and stepped forward. My boots thudded softly on the boards. Wade didn't follow, but I could feel his eyes anchored to my back. I scanned for signs of life. Shoes, a purse, a jacket by the door. Nothing. No scent of food, no fridge hum. Just stillness. The hallway narrowed, its bare walls pulling me toward the single partially open door at the far end. An amber glow spilled from the gap. The air felt heavy, like the house had drawn in a breath and was waiting to see what I'd do. I glanced back. Wade was there, closer than before, standing perfectly still, like he'd drifted forward without making a sound. I stepped into the room. No Mara, no furniture, no windows, just the mirror. It stood on the far wall, taller than it had seemed in the photos, tilted forward as if someone had just stepped away from adjusting it. The carved oak frame was even more intricate up close, lilies and vines etched deep enough to catch shadows. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that made me stop. It was the glass. It didn't reflect me. Not at first. It was dark, like looking through smoked glass into another room entirely. Slowly, the reflection began to take shape. The walls, the floor, me. And then, faint but certain, I saw them. Smudges. Palm prints. Pressed from the inside. Someone had been trying to get out. My stomach turned cold. That's when I noticed the sticky note. A small square of yellow, taped to the upper right corner of the mirror. Its edges curled, the ink scrawled in a quick slanted hand. "Don't turn around. Walk out fast." I froze. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned out the hum of the single light bulb overhead. And then, breathing. Not mine. Slow, deliberate. close enough that I could feel the shift of the air on the back of my neck. "Where's Mara?" My voice sounded too casual, too light for how my chest was tightening. "She's resting," Wade said behind me. The exact same tone, the exact same words as before. I smiled without thinking. Reflex politeness, survival instinct. "Oh, okay. I think I left my cash in the Jeep." He didn't move, didn't answer, just stood there blocking most of the hallway. My hand closed around my phone inside my coat pocket. "Just 1 second." I turned slowly, walking toward the front door like I had all the time in the world. No sudden movements, no rush. He didn't follow. Not yet. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit me like a slap. I took the long way around my Jeep, pretending to check the back seat, pretending to search for something. I didn't glance at the house, didn't check if he was in the doorway. I climbed in, locked the doors, jammed the key into the ignition. The porch light hummed behind me. No footsteps, no sound. I backed out fast, gravel spitting from my tires, and didn't ease off the gas until I reached the main road. That's when I saw it, just off to the right, where the trees nearly touched the edge of the road. A steel burn barrel, hidden behind branches, a faint column of pale smoke curling into the dark. I glanced for a second. Inside, blackened wood, melted plastic, and God, something that looked like a purse, or what was left of one. Red leather, buckled front, the kind I'd seen in vintage shops. I didn't stop, didn't take a picture. I just drove. I didn't call 911 until I was back in town, parked outside a gas station, my forehead pressed to my hands. When I finally told the dispatcher, I kept my voice steady. The mirror, the man, the note, the address. I left out the part about my legs trembling so badly I could barely hit the brake. That night I left every light on. My cat hid under the bed and wouldn't come out. 2 days later, a deputy called back. The house was empty, furniture gone, no mirror, no sign of Wade, no Mara J in the county records. CRAIGSLIST listing deleted. Could have been a squatter, he said. Could have been a fake name. File a report, nothing more they could do. I still had the sticky note. I'd shoved it into my pocket without thinking. That night I taped it to my fridge, not as a keepsake but as a warning. I stopped using CRAIGSLIST, went back to big box stores and online catalogs. Etsy sometimes. Facebook Marketplace if I needed a deal, but only porch pickups, only in public places, and no mirrors. I thought I'd forget. That's the lie we tell ourselves after a close call. Time will blur it. But the body remembers. The next week I couldn't sleep through the night. I'd wake at 3 or 4 a.m., certain I'd heard footsteps or a door shifting. My phone stayed in my hand under the blanket, the blue light flickering against the ceiling. I installed the video doorbell I'd bought a year ago but never set up. It didn't make me sleep better, but I needed to know if anyone came to that door. A few mornings later, Luis, my neighbor across the hall, knocked while I was sorting paint swatches in the entryway. Coffee in hand, wearing the same hoodie I'd seen him in a dozen times. We'd never gone beyond a nod in passing. "You all right?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. "Yeah." "Why?" "Other night you came back quick. Looked pale. Weird vibe. Then 2 nights later I saw a white pickup circling the lot. No lights." That was the first time I told someone the real story. The smell of the house, the hollow emptiness, the sticky note, the prints inside the mirror. Luis didn't laugh or frown. He just listened. When I finished, he nodded once. "Yeah, that wasn't a cellar. That was a setup." The word settled in me like a stone. "CRAIGSLIST is like rolling dice," he said. "Most folks are normal. Some aren't. And they count on you thinking they are." After that, he checked in more. Small gestures. A wave when I came home. A single tap on the wall between our apartments before bed. It helped. Still, I moved differently in my own space. Slower, scanning corners, avoiding catching my own reflection. The mirror stayed in my head like a thorn I couldn't pull out. Not just because of what almost happened, but because someone had left a warning. Someone before me. Someone who didn't get out. It took 3 months before I could walk into a thrift store. And even then, I stuck to clothes and kitchenware. No furniture, no glass. I looked past mirrors like they were open doors to places I had no intention of visiting. In January, I bought a small bathroom mirror from Target. Still in the packaging, still sealed. I kept it covered for the first week, like it needed to earn my trust. One night while brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection looking wrong. Not supernatural, just tired. Shoulders curved in, eyes dull. I hadn't noticed how small I'd made myself. That's when it hit me. The scariest part wasn't Wade or the house or even the mirror. It was how easy it had been for someone to piece together just enough of my life to bait the trap. A woman, alone, redecorating after a breakup, looking for charm, willing to drive a little too far for the right price. I'd handed that story to the internet without realizing it, through social posts, CRAIGSLIST messages, breadcrumbs. That's all a predator needs. They don't chase, they wait. The sticky note is still on my fridge, curling at the edges. I've thought about throwing it away, but I can't. Someone left it for me, a stranger who didn't get the chance to walk away. If I hadn't read it, if I'd turned my back to the mirror, I don't know what would have happened. I moved again after my lease ended, closer to family, brighter windows, a street where the lights stay on. I still decorate, still love old things, but now I care as much about where they come from as how they look. The past leaves fingerprints, not always on the surface, sometimes pressed deep in places no one cleans. The most dangerous offers don't come with warnings, and sometimes the only thing between you and a trap is listening when fear whispers, "Go," even if it's just a mirror. Long before I met Mr. Kenny, I was already sinking, just not in any way people could see from the outside. I was 22 and broke in the real stomach-hollow way. Not, I need to watch my budget, broke. Not, maybe I shouldn't order takeout, broke. I had exactly $947 to my name, a handful of loose change under the couch cushion, and half a pack of ramen shoved in the corner of my cousin Calvin's pantry. Calvin was 3 years older, already working full-time at a sheet metal shop, already irritated that my couple of days on his couch had somehow stretched into 3 weeks. We weren't close. I didn't have many people left to ask. He'd only agreed to let me stay on one condition: don't bring in any weird CRAIGSLIST crap. That morning I opened every gig app on my phone, scrolled, refreshed. Nothing. Nobody was looking for a college dropout who'd lasted 1 semester at Lackawanna before bailing, and whose last warehouse job had ended when restructuring cut half the staff. I was sick of lying in application messages, pretending to be the kind of person worth hiring. Then I saw it. Help needed. Light outdoor work. $100 cash. Lunch included. Must be okay with dogs. 3 to 4 hours max. No experience required. Call before 10 a.m. I stared at it for a long time. It felt like bait. Too simple. Too neat. But I was hungry enough to bite. I called. The voice on the other end was warm, almost grandfatherly. "Theo, is it? I'm Mr. Kenny. You sound polite. That's rare these days. Thank you for calling." He explained it was just some yard work, clearing vines, moving old fence panels. "I make soup from scratch," he added. "Don't worry, nothing weird, you'll be well fed." That's when I should have hung up. The fact that he felt the need to say, "nothing weird." But I didn't, because I needed the money. The place was off West Mountain Road, right where the houses thin out and the tree line presses in. Not completely isolated, but far enough that if you screamed, nobody would hear unless they were already on the porch. The gravel driveway was long and uneven, with weeds curling in from both sides. The house looked tired, paint chipped and flaking, gutters sagging, porch steps soft-looking in places. From behind a side gate, a massive dog barked, a deep, hoarse sound that rattled in my ribs. The chain around his neck clinked with every lunge. Kenny opened the front door in tucked-in slacks and a neatly ironed shirt, like he'd been expecting a dinner guest, not someone to rip thorns out of his yard. "Theo, right?" he said, smiling like we'd known each other for years. "You look young. That's good. Energy matters." I nodded, trying to return the smile. He handed me a pair of gloves that looked older than me and pointed toward the overgrown backyard. "Start with the vines near the fence, the ones with thorns. Just take your time." The dog barked again. Kenny glanced at him. "Don't mind Sherman. He's all noise." I got to work. The gloves were too thin and the vines weren't really vines, they were brambles. Thick, wiry things that clung to my sleeves and fought every tug. Twice I sliced my hands on hidden thorns, the sting sharp, the blood quick. After maybe 40 minutes, Kenny came out with lemonade in a glass cup. Not a plastic bottle, not a paper cup, something out of a kitchen cabinet like this was a tea party. "You can take breaks inside if it gets too hot," he said. "Sherman's chained, he won't bite." But I didn't want to go inside. Not yet. Something about the house. It wasn't anything I could point to, but it made my skin prickle. I needed the 100, though, so I stayed bent over the fence line. The sun climbed, slow and punishing, baking the yard in heavy humidity. Sherman barked less now, maybe bored of me. I had cleared almost half the fence when Kenny came out again, this time empty-handed. "You close with your family, Theo?" he asked, like we were mid-therapy session. "Not really," I said, prying a stubborn vine from the base of a fence post. "No girlfriend?" I shook my head. "Nope." He nodded slowly, like that meant something. "Sometimes it's easier alone. That's all right. Not everyone needs someone." He lingered nearby, watching my hands more than the yard. After a few minutes, he smiled. "I make a great chicken soup. Lunch is almost ready." "Thanks," I muttered, my stomach tightening with hunger now. He didn't head back inside. Instead, he tilted his head. "You ever sleep in your car?" I straightened up, blinking at him. "No. Why?" "Just wondering," he said, still smiling. "Sometimes life corners you and you end up sitting in a hot parking lot with the windows cracked wondering, how the hell did I get here?" I wiped sweat from my forehead. "I'm good, really." "Of course," Kenny said, smiling again. But it was a different kind of smile this time. His mouth was doing the work, but his eyes stayed flat like they were looking through me. By noon, I'd cleared the fence line and had started stacking old, splintered wood by the shed. That's when I heard him call from the back door. "Come eat before it gets cold." I hesitated, Calvin's warning crawling back into my head. Don't go in anyone's house. CRAIGSLIST is where caution goes to die. But my stomach was hollow, my head buzzing from the heat. The work had been legit so far, so I figured lunch would be too. Inside, the air was still. No radio, no TV, not even the low hum of a fridge. The walls were a washed-out beige, bare of photos or art. No signs of a life lived, just a thin rug under a table and a wall clock that ticked so loud it almost felt like it was inside my head. He served soup in a heavy ceramic bowl, chicken, celery, carrots, exactly like he'd promised. "Don't worry," he said again, smiling in that too calm way. "Nothing weird." I didn't laugh. I just kept my eyes on the floor and ate fast. "You're good with your hands," Kenny said. "You around more often?" I shrugged without looking up. "Guess so. Strong back, reliable. I could use someone like you." I kept my spoon moving, trying to keep it casual. "I just need the cash right now." "Oh, of course, of course." I scraped the bottom of the bowl, stood up. "I should head out. My cousin needs the car by 3. That was the first time the smile slipped from his face. "I thought you needed money." "I do, I'm just on a schedule." His eyes didn't change, but something about the way he was standing, hands loose at his sides, made the hairs on my neck stand up. "Hope your cousin's okay," he said. "A boy came by a couple months ago just like you. Didn't finish the job either." I didn't answer. I just stepped toward the door. He didn't try to stop me, didn't even move, just stood there smiling faintly like we both knew something I wasn't going to say out loud. I walked fast down the gravel driveway, my pulse thudding in my ears. That night I lay on Calvin's couch staring at the popcorn ceiling, trying to shake the way Kenny had said, "I thought you needed money." At 10:42 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "If you're still hungry, I have another shift. This time no vines, just stories." I blocked it without replying. The next day, I was back on Craigslist. Not because I wanted to be, but because rent and groceries didn't care about bad vibes. And there it was again. Same ad, same wording. Only now it said $120. Must be okay with dogs. Repeat applicants welcome. My chest sank. I flagged it. That night I told Calvin. He gave a low whistle. "Don't come back from gigs like that. You're lucky, man." "Lucky how?" I asked. "There's guys out there who look normal, nice even, but they're just waiting. Craigslist is perfect for them. Cheap, quiet, off the books. Who's gonna track a missing yard worker? You?" I didn't sleep much after that. Over the next week, I kept trying to bury the whole thing, but it stayed with me. Not fear exactly, not even trauma, just a weight. I found myself watching people more closely, their smiles, the way they stood, the pauses in their sentences. I noticed every ad that sounded too good to be true, and I realized how thin the line really was between a $100 gig and a headline that starts with "Unidentified remains found." Kenny never texted again, at least not from that number, but the ad kept showing up. Sometimes the pay was higher, sometimes "must be okay with dogs" was replaced with "comfortable in secluded settings." Each time I flagged it, Craigslist never replied. They don't. It's like screaming into a well. I wish I could say I found proof, news articles, missing person reports, but real life doesn't work that clean. Sometimes you just leave a house knowing in your bones that something was wrong. I never went back, never replied. But every now and then, I scroll through gigs again. Not because I'm broke anymore, but because I can't help it. The ads are always there. Different names, same rhythm, quick work, cash in hand, lunch included. I don't apply now. I've got a part-time delivery job that turned into full-time, a room I rent, decent meals. But if you ever find yourself broke, tired, down to your last few bucks, telling yourself, "It's just a few hours of work," I hope you remember this. Some jobs don't pay in cash. Some doors should never open. And if someone tells you nothing weird before you've even asked, walk away. Desperation clouds judgment, but instincts, they're all you've got. Listen to them. Always. Bismarck goes real quiet in November. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind that makes you notice things you normally don't. The faint ticking of the wall clock in the kitchen, the house frame giving soft groans as it settles. The dry scrape of wind-driven leaves brushing the window glass. That night sticks with me not just because of what happened, but because of how ordinary it began. Boring even. I was 19, broke, and trying to keep my head above water. I was still in community college, pulling half shifts at the gas station on Main and helping my mom hold things together after my dad bailed. He'd moved to Wyoming in the spring with some woman he met at a car show, taking only his clothes, his tools, and his damn recliner. Everything else, bills, memories, the responsibility of keeping a house running, he left with us. The gas station job barely covered my own expenses, but most weeks I handed my mom half my paycheck without her asking. I'd see the stack of late notices on the kitchen counter and know she was skipping meals some nights just to keep the lights on. We'd been combing through the attic for weeks, looking for anything to sell. Old end tables, stacks of books, trinkets that hadn't been touched in years. We kept telling ourselves if we found just a little more, we could make it through Christmas without borrowing. That's when I found it. my grandpa's old Technics turntable, still in its original box, sitting beside a milk crate full of vinyl. Coltrane, Miles Davis, Hendrix, the kind of records that made you stop and just hold them for a second. I almost closed the crate again because it felt wrong even thinking about selling them. Grandpa used to play those Sunday mornings while he made eggs and toast, humming along between flipping the bacon. But nostalgia doesn't keep the house warm. At some point you realize you'd trade a dozen good memories for a working radiator and a full tank of gas. So I listed it on CRAIGSLIST. Vintage Technics turntable with jazz and rock records, $300, pickup only. By the next morning, 4 messages had come in. 3 were lowball offers. The 4th was from a woman named Eileen. Said her husband was a jazz musician, that he'd treasure the set. She offered $350 without hesitation, claimed it was for his birthday. It felt genuine the way she worded it. We traded a few texts. I told her Monday would work best since Mom would be out visiting her sister in Fargo. Eileen said Sunday night was their only chance. Her husband was leaving for a tour early Monday morning. Something about that answer felt packaged, like she'd rehearsed it. But I pushed the thought away. We needed the money, and I wanted to feel like I was actually helping. Mom warned me, as she always did, to be careful and not let strangers inside. I promised her I wouldn't. By 7:30 that night, she'd left for Fargo. I moved the turntable into the front room near the big window so I could keep everything in sight. Porch light on. Phone fully charged. I even texted my buddy Blake to mess around. Hope she doesn't rob me blind for a Coltrane LP. He replied, if she brings wine and a jazz flute, run. I laughed, but by 8:05 my chest had that slow, tightening weight you get when something's wrong and you can't quite name it. A gray sedan turned into the driveway. Headlights stayed on longer than they should have, and the passenger side of the car was shadow dark. Nobody moved right away. Then a man stepped out, mid-40s, tall, neatly trimmed beard, clean jacket. The kind of guy you wouldn't look at twice in a grocery store, which I realize now might have been the most dangerous thing about him. He walked to the porch like he'd done it 100 times before and knocked lightly. Not eager, not impatient, just testing. I opened the door halfway. Eileen? He smiled politely. She's in the car. Migraine. I'm her husband, Thomas. Oh, okay, I said, not moving from the doorway. She told me she'd be the one picking it up. She was going to, but she's laying down. I can just take a quick look if that's all right. I hesitated. He didn't fidget. Didn't give off that twitchy energy people get when they're lying. Calm, friendly, harmless. Or at least he wore the mask well. I stepped back and motioned him in, keeping the door open, my little compromise between politeness and caution. Thomas crossed the threshold and immediately zeroed in on the turntable. Nice, he said, running a careful hand along the dust cover. These are hard to find in good shape. He started flipping through the records like he knew what he was looking for. She's gonna love this. Technics, monk. Damn. Then he started asking questions. Too many questions. And not the right kind. Do you store them somewhere else? Then he looked up at me. Any scratches on the table? He asked, running a hand over the dust cover again. Got more records, you... What's back there? His chin lifted toward the hallway behind me. Just bedrooms, I said quickly, shifting my stance so I was between him and the hall. Something in his voice changed then. Still polite, but less casual, more pointed. You live here alone? No, I lied, forcing a half smile. My uncle's in the garage. He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching like he'd just caught me in a bluff. Really? Didn't hear any cars. That was the moment the air in the room seemed to tilt. The easy, friendly energy he'd been projecting cracked, and underneath it was something colder. My heart started kicking hard enough that I could hear it in my ears, and then, tap. A faint, deliberate sound at the back patio door. He didn't flinch, didn't even glance toward it, which told me he already knew it was there. I moved fast. "Uncle Mike!" I shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the thin November air. "Can you come out here a sec?" There was no Uncle Mike. But that didn't matter. Thomas's eyes locked on mine in a long, assessing way, like he was running math in his head. Me, the house, the sound at the back door, deciding. That pause was all I needed. I bolted through the kitchen, the adrenaline making everything sharp and fast, like the house had shrunk around me. My phone sat charging next to the microwave. I snatched it, then yanked open the cabinet where the old home security panel lived. We'd barely touched that system in years. My dad had installed it before he left, and most of the time the panel just blinked quietly to itself. But I remembered one thing, the red panic button. I slammed my palm into it. The alarm didn't just ring, it howled. A piercing, metallic scream that rattled the windows and seemed to bounce off every wall in the house. Thomas froze mid-step, just for a breath. Then he turned and ran. No hesitation, no attempt to smooth things over, just full flight through the open front door. I chased him far enough to slam the lock behind him, my hands shaking so hard I fumbled the deadbolt. Heart hammering, I peered through the blinds. He sprinted for the gray sedan, jumped in, and tore down Ridgewood Drive, the taillights vanishing into the dark. There was no Eileen in the car. The police arrived 11 minutes later, calm, professional. They had me tell the story twice, making notes, asking the same questions in different ways to see if my answers matched. I showed them the messages, the fake name, the car description. One of the officers, older with a tired kind of face, told me quietly, this wasn't rare. Some people answer Craigslist ads just to scope homes, he said. Figure out who's alone, what's worth coming back for. He asked what I thought saved me. I said the alarm. He shook his head. Trusting your gut, he said. The alarm just sealed the deal. I didn't sleep that night. My mom got home at dawn, and I told her everything. She cried, not out of fear, but because I hadn't asked her to stay home. The records went back into the attic. The turntable, too. No more Craigslist for a while. A week later, a detective from the next county called. They'd found a gray sedan abandoned outside a boarded-up farmhouse. Inside, power tools, TVs, kitchen appliances, all stolen. And a printed list, Craigslist ads with addresses, times, and dates. Mine was on it, circled in red ink. I didn't ask what else they found. I didn't want to know. That weekend, Mom changed the locks and paid for a new security system. We switched to Facebook Marketplace but only met buyers in crowded grocery store parking lots during daylight. I started using a fake name for listings, made a burner email, and even took a self-defense course with Blake. No one was ever arrested. The police said they had enough to file a report, but not enough to charge anyone. Craigslist doesn't verify accounts. And Eileen was probably just a name he picked off the top of his head. Sometimes I think about how quickly it all turned. How polite he'd been, how clean-cut, how safe he'd looked. We grow up believing danger announces itself. Shifty eyes, dirty clothes, obvious malice. But it's the opposite. Real danger knocks softly. It smiles, says please and thank you. It wants you to feel at ease until you're not. I still help Mom with bills, still sort through the attic sometimes, but the turntable stays where it is. Grandpa wouldn't care about the money. He'd care that we're safe. And I'll never forget what the officer told me before he left that night. Craigslist makes it easy to find buyers, but it also makes it easy to find victims. Never ignore your instincts. I don't care how friendly someone seems. If something feels wrong, it probably is. No sale is worth your life. People like to say you find yourself after a breakup, like it's this clean cinematic moment where you start wearing linen shirts and drinking green juice. They don't tell you how it actually happens. Slow, messy, and with a lot of nights where you're just trying to keep your head above water. By the time I left Shannon, I was 33, broke, and running on the fumes of whatever self-worth I'd had left. She had this quiet, practiced way of shrinking me. Never enough in one go for me to notice just little cuts over time. I started apologizing for turning the TV up, for buying a $20 sweater without clearing it with her first. The last straw came on a Tuesday night that bled into Wednesday morning. One of those arguments that circles the drain for hours until you're both sitting there in a silence so heavy it feels like static in your ears. I packed a single duffel and left before the sun even hinted at coming up. Didn't take the coffee pot, didn't leave a note. Just drove until I stopped thinking. The apartment I found east of Albuquerque was the cheapest one listed that had a working toilet. 1 bedroom, beige carpet, ceiling fan that wobbled like it had something to say but was too tired to get the words out. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I could eat cereal for dinner without judgment, leave dishes in the sink overnight, and not brace for a sigh or a cutting remark. That kind of small freedom feels holy when you've been denied it long enough. Only problem, the place didn't have a fridge. I spent 3 weeks living out of a cooler, swapping out bags of ice every 2 days, trying to keep the lunch meat cold enough to avoid food poisoning. My warehouse paycheck barely covered rent. Anything new I could afford was either garbage or on back order for months. Facebook Marketplace was a bust. People ghosted or gave vague excuses. Finally, I turned to CRAIGSLIST, with all its oddball energy and faint whiff of, this could be how I die. I told myself if I met during daylight, stayed sharp, and trusted my gut, I'd be fine. That's when I saw it. Mini fridge, works fine, $60, pickup only, ask for Nora. The pictures showed a scuffed but clean white fridge. Inside looked fine. Nora emailed back within an hour. Said she was busy with her dad's medical stuff, but her Uncle Dean would be home and could help load it. The address was out on Los Ventanas Lane, west of town. Far enough to feel remote, but not enough to set off alarms. I almost asked a friend to come with me, but he got stuck at work. The sun was still up. What could go wrong? I pulled into the gravel driveway at 4:50 sharp. The trailer was exactly what you'd expect. Faded siding, a yard scattered with rusting junk, wind chimes clinking in the breeze, the kind of rural quiet that makes you feel like you're the one being watched. A man stepped out from behind the screen door. Heavy set, maybe mid-50s, Broncos hoodie with what looked like drywall dust on the front. "You here for the fridge?" he asked. "Yeah, Nora said you'd be around." "Name's Dean," he said, holding the door open. "It's in the garage. Come on." And just like that, I was following a man I'd never met toward a fridge I didn't need badly enough to ignore the way my gut tightened. But I did. The garage was a standalone metal shed, big enough for 1 car. The overhead door was rolled halfway up, rattling in the wind. Inside was dim, lit by a single bare bulb dangling from a cord, swaying just enough to make the shadows shift like something breathing. The air smelled of sawdust, rubber, and rust. Dean gestured for me to follow him toward the back. The fridge sat in the corner, unplugged but clean. White, small dent on the left, nothing major. My niece moved out. "Don't need it no more," he said, tugging the door open. I leaned in. "Looks good, no mold." The inside was fine, not sparkling, but no weird smell. Seemed normal. Dean stood next to it, arms folded, eyes fixed on me like he was waiting for me to say something specific. He still hadn't asked my name, hadn't mentioned the money. Just watched. That's when I noticed the workbench against the wall. A sheet of paper sat there, folded once but not enough to hide what was on it. Our CRAIGSLIST messages printed out. My eyes locked on the dark circle drawn around my full name, the timestamp just below it. He hadn't just printed it. He'd studied it. I forced a casual smile, even though my pulse was hammering in my neck. "Oh, crap," I said, pretending like I'd just remembered something. "I think I left my dolly in my buddy's car. He was going to come help, but he got stuck in traffic." Dean tilted his head slightly, like a dog trying to make sense of a strange noise. "So, you came alone?" I kept my tone light. breezy. For now. But I texted him the address. He should be here in like 10 minutes. He didn't respond, just scratched absently at the patchy hair along his jaw, eyes still on me. I was already edging toward the garage door when he finally spoke. "It's only $60, he said flatly. "You sure you want it?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "I'll just grab the cash from my car. Be right back." As I turned, something under a tarp along the side wall caught my eye. Another fridge. Same make, but older. The handle was cracked, and near the bottom corner, just above the concrete floor, was a dark, reddish-brown stain. Dried. Old. Could have been rust. But my brain decided it wasn't. I didn't stop to study it. I didn't even let my eyes linger long enough for him to notice. I just kept walking, pace steady, no running, no sudden movements, just the brisk walk of someone late for an appointment. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt heavy, unmoving, like the whole yard had been holding its breath. My keys were already in my hand. I unlocked the car in one motion, slid inside, and hit the lock button before I exhaled. Only then did I glance in the rear view. Dean was standing just beyond the garage door in the gravel driveway. Still. Silent. Watching. Not waving, not calling out. Just standing there with that same unreadable expression like he was memorizing my car, my plates, my face. I started the engine and backed out slow, forcing myself not to slam the gas. I didn't look back again until I was 5 miles away. I didn't call the cops. What was I supposed to say? That a guy gave me bad vibes and owned a fridge with a suspicious stain? CRAIGSLIST was full of stories like that. I told myself maybe Dean was just socially awkward. Maybe he printed the messages because he didn't like using his phone. Maybe the second fridge was just old and grimy. But the feeling stuck to me like smoke. It followed me through dinner, through a restless night, through my shift at the warehouse the next day. Every time I pictured the garage, I saw the tarp, the swinging light bulb, the paper with my name circled in pen. 3 nights later, I was half watching reruns on the couch when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local teen missing after appliance pickup. Last seen, Las Ventanas Lane. A 19-year-old kid, a delivery driver, had gone to a rural property to collect a washer. He never came back. The road name hit me like a punch to the ribs. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called the tip line, rattled off the address, Dean's name, every detail I could remember, from the Broncos hoodie to the busted mini fridge with the reddish stain. The woman on the phone asked if I wanted to give my name. I told her no. I didn't want it coming back to me. I just wanted them to have enough to find something. Or someone. A week later, I was checking local news obsessively. The update I found was buried under small-town crime briefs. Police investigate property on Las Ventanas Lane. Residence empty. Garage padlocked. They didn't find the kid. Not yet. The article didn't mention Dean or a fridge, but I knew exactly what they were looking for. I knew what I'd walked away from. Some of my friends roll their eyes when I tell the story. One laughed and said, "Maybe the guy was just weird. Not everything's a horror movie, dude." Maybe. But every time I open my own fridge now, bright white light spilling over milk cartons and Tupperware, I see that garage. I see the tarp. I see the paper with my name in bold ink. And I think about the kid who never came back. It's been over a year. I don't touch CRAIGSLIST anymore. Eventually, I found a decent fridge through a neighbor, paid $100 and dragged it upstairs alone, back screaming the whole time. Worth it. I still live in that little one-bedroom east of Albuquerque. The ceiling fan still wobbles. The carpet still smells weird after it rains. But it's quiet. It's safe. It's mine. And sometimes, when I've had a few drinks, I tell the story. Not for laughs, not for drama, just so someone else knows. People talk about close calls, but I don't tell mine often. It's like a bruise under a shirt, hidden, tender, and only you know it's there. That night in the garage taught me something I hadn't expected. Danger doesn't always arrive with flashing lights or blaring sirens. Sometimes it's quieter, subtler. A flicker in someone's eyes, a strange email you weren't supposed to see, a smear of something where it doesn't belong. Those are the warnings, and you either listen or you don't. Because in that garage, the light wasn't dim enough to hide the truth from me. For someone else, though, it had already been too late. I learned, really learned, that instincts aren't suggestions. When your gut whispers that something's wrong, you don't ignore it. You don't let fear of sounding paranoid or being impolite override the primal urge to get away. In a world where desperation makes people blind to danger, your survival might depend on walking away without an apology. No second-hand bargain, no extra paycheck, no amazing deal is worth gambling your life on. People love to talk about fresh starts, as if they're all sunshine and clean slates. What they never mention is how oppressive the silence can feel when you close the door on a new place for the first time, and it's just you. No footsteps in the hallway, no second voice calling your name. I just ended a 7-year relationship with Micah. No betrayals, no fights worth repeating. Just two people slowly drifting toward different futures, like boats that no longer shared the same current. When I left, I didn't just leave him. I left the couch we'd picked out together, the dishes, the bed frame we'd argued over in IKEA, the life we'd built in small, ordinary objects. All I took was my cat, 2 suitcases, and a loneliness so heavy it felt like luggage of its own. My new apartment sat on the edge of Pasadena, Texas. 2nd floor, beige walls, and a faint stale smell, like someone had smoked out the window for years. But it was mine. I was determined to shape it into something that felt like me. I collected furniture slowly. A folding table from Facebook Marketplace, a thrifted lamp from the Goodwill on Spencer Highway. Every choice was mine alone, and that independence was intoxicating. The dresser was supposed to be another small victory. I was tired of living out of laundry baskets. Sierra, my friend from Austin, had warned me about CRAIGSLIST more than once. CRAIGSLIST is roulette, she'd said. Either you find a deal, or you find someone who wants to wear your skin. I laughed it off, but her words lingered. Then I saw it. Solid wood, 6 drawers, just one handle missing, $30, will help load. Posted only hours earlier. The seller's name was Eli. He replied to my first message almost instantly. Too instantly. His tone was friendly, but overly curious for a used furniture exchange. Where's your place? Upstairs or down? You alone? Just so I don't waste my brother's time. I told myself he was just being practical about moving something heavy. Cautious but not paranoid, I suggested meeting somewhere public. The abandoned Payless parking lot off Crenshaw, just before 7. It was close to home, open enough to feel safe. At 6:55 p.m., I pulled in. There he was, white van parked in the far corner near a busted light post, driver's door open, Eli standing like he'd been waiting a while, tall, calm-looking, maybe late 30s. Windbreaker zipped up despite the heat, 82-degree, and a smile that didn't quite touch his eyes. "You Callie?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, stepping out, my keys threaded between my fingers. "You got the dresser?" "Right in the back." He gestured toward the van. "Want help getting it upstairs? It's solid, heavy." "I'll manage," I said quickly. He looked me over. "Huh, I thought you'd be taller." That threw me. "What?" He chuckled. "Your voice in the messages. Just imagine someone taller." My stomach dropped. I hadn't sent a single voice message. I kept my expression neutral, refusing to let the unease show. He opened the back of the van, revealing the dresser, real, heavy, scuffed at the edges, one handle missing just like the ad said. Solid wood. My pulse slowed a fraction. Maybe I was overthinking. "Take your time looking at it," Eli said, smiling like he was being polite. But I noticed his hand resting lightly on the edge of the van door, like he could close it at any second. "You know," Eli said casually, like we were talking about the weather, "if your apartment's close, I could just follow you, help carry it in. Kind of a pain to do solo." "I'm okay," I said, too fast, too firm. He stepped closer, just one step, but enough for me to feel my pulse pick up. "You sure? I mean, your back's probably still strained, right?" My fingers froze on the car door handle. I hadn't told him about my back. Not in the messages. Not here. His face didn't change. Calm, smiling, unblinking. 2 days ago, I'd pulled a muscle hauling groceries up the stairs. I'd joked about it in a Facebook status. Pulled something lifting groceries. 30 is the new 80. It was nothing. Just a throwaway line for friends. Yet here I was, standing in front of a man who also knew my voice, though I'd never sent a voice message and had mentioned I lived off Shell Street, something I'd never confirmed. "You good?" he asked softly. I kept my voice level. "My neighbor Luis is inside. He can help carry it." A pause. Then he nodded. "Fair enough." I slid into my car, locked the doors before my seatbelt was even on, and drove away without looking in the mirror. That should have been the end of it. That night, I couldn't settle. I fed my cat, Scout, checked the blinds over and over like some jittery crime show widow. Around 9:30, I made tea, tried to lose myself in something brainless on TV. At 10:17, I saw it. A white van. Same busted passenger side mirror. Rolling slow past my building with its headlights off, engine humming low. My breath caught. I ducked back from the window, heart thudding in my ears. I called the non-emergency police line. "Did he say or do anything threatening?" the woman asked, her voice polite but tired. "No, but he knew things, stuff I never told him." "Okay, we'll make a note. If you see the van again, call right away." I hung up feeling smaller than when I'd called. No patrol car, no reassurance, just that same hollow question in my chest. Am I overreacting? At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You forgot your change. Want me to bring it by?" I hadn't given him my number. I stared at the message until my phone screen went black, then blocked it. I shoved the phone under my pillow, like burying it would make it less real. It didn't. The next morning, I went straight to Walmart and bought a doorbell camera. Luis, the quiet neighbor across the hall, mid-40s, always in socks with sandals, spotted me fiddling with it in the hallway. "You good?" he asked, like he already knew the answer. "That guy in the van," I said slowly. "You saw him?" Luis nodded. "Pulled up slow last night. I was outside smoking. Didn't like how he looked at your window. You want? I can keep an eye out. I'm usually home nights." I didn't know him well, but right then, he was the only person who felt solid. Real. I filed a complaint with CRAIGSLIST. The ad was gone, erased, like it had never existed. For weeks afterward, every white van I saw, at the grocery store, parked down the street pulling out of a side road, made my stomach knot. I took different routes home, kept my phone location off, locked the door even for the 30 seconds it took to take out the trash. I never heard from Eli again, but I never truly believed he was gone. He'd backed off, not because he respected my no, but because someone else had been watching too. Eventually, the fear softened into something duller. I bought a dresser from a real store. Paid more than I wanted to, but I needed it to feel solid. Not just the wood, the choice. Luis still checked in sometimes, a wave, a quick, "You good?" text. Once he helped me carry up a heavy box. We weren't friends, but sometimes you don't need friends. Sometimes you just need someone who notices. I never found out Eli's real name, never learned if he had a record. But I kept the door camera running. I kept the message he sent just in case. I still scroll CRAIGSLIST once in a while for deals. I ask better questions now. More importantly, I listen when my gut whispers, even if it's only a whisper, because it's never just a little off. Scout still curls at the foot of my bed. The dresser sits in the corner. Real heavy, mine. And I've learned something I wish I didn't have to. There's no such thing as harmless curiosity when it comes wrapped in van doors and too many questions. It's never just furniture. Not when it's someone's excuse to get closer to you. Trust your gut. Silence isn't safety, and no bargain is worth your peace of mind. There's a kind of loneliness no one really warns you about. It's not dramatic or jagged or the sort that leaves you sobbing into a pillow. It's quieter than that. It's waking up and realizing you haven't heard your name spoken gently in days. It's walking home in the dark and knowing that nobody, anywhere, is wondering if you made it back safely. When my last relationship ended, I didn't fall apart. I wasn't shattered or heartbroken, more like worn down, running on fumes, quietly relieved it was over. But even relief has shadows. There was still a part of me that ached for someone to really see me. I was 25, waist deep in my graduate thesis on comparative literature, which meant most days blurred into endless scrolling through PDFs, highlighting the same sentence over and over, my brain too fogged to move on. My roommate, Callie, was my lifeline. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, sharp-witted, quick to cut someone down with a joke, but in a way that made you laugh anyway. Protective, too. Once, over a bottle of cheap wine, she said, "If you ever date again, make sure he's never used the word enlightened to describe himself." I laughed and agreed, partly because my last boyfriend had, and she knew it. This whole thing started because I needed a bookshelf. Nothing fancy, just something sturdy enough to hold my battered poetry books and the pile of secondhand journals I kept picking up at thrift stores. Walmart furniture had failed me twice already, collapsing in slow, humiliating stages, so I turned to CRAIGSLIST. That strange little corner of the internet where things still feel unpolished and human. The listing was simple: gently used oak bookshelf, $25, still smells like wood polish, perfect for books or plants, can deliver locally. I messaged the seller. His name was Drew. He offered to drop it off at my apartment, but I wasn't about to give my address to a stranger. Instead, I suggested we meet at a coffee shop off Prince Avenue. Saturday, 2:15 p.m., February 10th. He pulled up right on time in a dusty hatchback, the bookshelf wrapped neatly in a blue moving blanket in the back. He looked like someone who might spend afternoons sketching strangers without asking. Wavy brown hair that curled near his collar, a faded denim jacket, hands marked with faint ink stains. "Didn't think it'd be this small," I said, eyeing the shelf. "Didn't think you'd be this pretty," he replied instantly. It was the kind of line that should have made me cringe, but there was something in his tone, gentle, almost teasing, that made it land differently. Harmless, almost sweet. We sat outside with coffee afterward, talking for longer than I expected. We traded stories about weird professors, our shared hatred of self-checkout machines, the joy of musty bookstores that smell like mildew and history. He told me he did freelance art projects. "I like not being pinned down," he said. "That must be freeing," I offered. "You seem real," he said suddenly. The words caught me off guard. Not in a threatening way, just like they fit somewhere deep I didn't know was empty. I smiled and looked down at my cup. He asked for my number before we left. I gave it to him without hesitation. That night, Callie frowned when I told her. "Number? No. That's how people disappear. You met him on CRAIGSLIST." "He's fine," I said, shaking my head. It felt normal. Normal. Better than normal. I didn't yet understand that sometimes normal wears a disguise. The next day, Drew texted me. It started with a meme about pretentious coffee orders, then a song link, then a short list of books we both hated for the exact same reasons. His messages had this unforced thoughtfulness, like he'd somehow gotten hold of a manual to my mind. He made me laugh, real laughter, the kind that leaves your stomach aching and your eyes wet. He never pried too quickly, never pushed for personal details, just observed. Whenever his name lit up my phone, Callie would arch an eyebrow. "You're glowing," she teased one night. "Is this a bookshelf romance?" "Stop," I said, rolling my eyes. But the phrase stuck with me. Bookshelf romance. Quiet, slow, unfolding in the edges of my life. The next weekend, coffee turned into a walk through North Campus. We meandered into a bookstore, taking turns picking the most ridiculous titles on display and reading the blurbs in exaggerated dramatic voices. Hours slipped away without me noticing, until my phone buzzed with a text from Callie. "Kidnapped yet?" That night, Drew sent me a playlist. Soft guitars, aching lyrics, and songs I'd loved in high school but hadn't thought about in years. It felt like he'd reached into a part of me I'd quietly sealed off. Something tender, unguarded, and long forgotten. I didn't overthink it. I didn't want to break whatever was happening. After months of feeling like I had to explain myself, defend myself, or shrink to keep the peace, being with someone who just listened, who didn't twist my words or treat me like I was too much, felt like stepping into warm light after weeks of fog. When he texted late at night, I always answered. If he said he liked hearing me rant about the poems I hated, I'd give him more. Whole paragraphs of irritation, each complaint a tiny offering. He never pressed for more than I gave. That restraint felt like oxygen. After what I'd been through, the absence of cruelty felt almost like kindness, and I clung to that. I never gave him my address. We only met on foot, always in public. It wasn't that I didn't trust him exactly. It was that I didn't trust the part of me that wanted to. Still, when he told me, "You make the world feel less fake," I let myself believe it. I let myself believe him. Because sometimes the wound just wants a hand, and it can't tell the difference between a healer and someone who's simply not hurting it. The first shift came quietly. It was a Thursday night, the kind of cold that sneaks up on you. I'd been in the library for hours wrestling with a section of my thesis that refused to make sense. By the time I packed up, it was nearly midnight. I took my usual route, past the fountain, down toward our apartment. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. "You walk home every Thursday around this time." I stopped. The message glowed in my palm like it was waiting for something. "How do you know that?" I typed back. A pause. Then, "I was passing by. Thought I saw you." I turned a slow circle on the sidewalk. Nothing behind me. No headlights, no footsteps. Just the hiss of leaves and the faint electric hum of the nearest street lamp. My throat felt tight. "That's kind of weird, Drew. Just means I care." I didn't answer. My heart was still pounding when I reached our building and buzzed myself inside. Upstairs, Callie was curled on the couch in sweatpants, eating cold noodles straight from the carton. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just tired." I tossed my phone onto the table like it was something that could burn me. She didn't buy it, but she didn't push either. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts spun in loops I didn't want to follow. Had I told him about my Thursday nights at the library? Had he asked, or had he been watching? And if he'd been watching, for how long? The playlist, the compliments, the gentle pace. It all started to feel like set dressing. Like someone had staged the perfect version of himself and invited me in. I thought about blocking him. I didn't. The truth was I'd liked him. Not just liked. I'd needed him, or at least the idea of him. Pulling that apart meant admitting I'd let myself believe in something that wasn't real. The next day, I stayed silent. So did he, until noon. "Hope you're okay. Let me know if you want to talk." I stared at it for a long time before typing. "I liked the version of you I met over coffee, the one who said I seemed real. That felt good. This doesn't." I hit send. No typing dots, no reply. The next morning, his number was deactivated, just like that. Over coffee, Callie caught me staring at my phone. "Did you block him?" "No," I said, setting it down. "He's gone." She didn't ask more. She just slid a pastry toward me. Someone who doesn't feel like a question mark. That's what you deserve. And that was it. I kept the bookshelf. I thought about selling it, but I didn't. It sits in the corner of my room now, lined with poetry collections and stubborn houseplants that refuse to die. I still play the playlist sometimes, not because I miss him, but because it reminds me of that strange week when I started to hope again, even if it ended with an empty echo. People can vanish fast. I never learned Drew's last name. Never saw another CRAIGSLIST post from him. He became a file in my mind labeled Caution, with a subfolder called Sometimes Longing. Callie and I moved 3 months later. I stopped walking past that coffee shop. Athens stayed the same, humid, noisy, thick with memory, but I had changed. I started listening to how people ask questions, noticing whether curiosity came from care or collection. I learned that being seen can feel good even when the gaze isn't real. I learned that loneliness has a pull, and it can drag you toward any flicker of warmth. And when you're starving for connection, a flicker can look like a doorway, even if it's just a mask. Not everyone who sees you truly sees you. Sometimes the most convincing kindness is just another costume. Trust your instincts, not just your heart. Love should never arrive wrapped in mystery. And when someone makes you feel like a question instead of an answer, you leave. I've lived on the same street in Henderson, Nevada for the past 11 years. It's one of those places where nothing really happens. Just row after row of sun-bleached houses, cracked sidewalks, and the occasional block party when someone's kid graduates high school. I work nights as a security guard, so I usually sleep through the daytime drama. Still, I remember the day everything changed like it was carved into my bones. 3 doors down from me lived a guy named Craig. He kept to himself. Always looked greasy, like he worked with oil in his sleep, and he rarely spoke unless you caught him near his garage and forced a conversation. People around here called him the wrench guy. He ran a makeshift auto shop out of his house. No sign, no name, no business hours. But everyone knew Craig could fix your car for cheap. I took my old Honda Civic to him once when it was leaking something nasty, and he patched it up without asking for a dime. Just waved me off with an absent grunt. He had this hollow look in his eyes, like sleep was something other people got, and he'd say weird things under his breath while he worked. Things like, "The world's too noisy." He lived alone. His wife had left him years ago. I only knew that because Tammy, my neighbor across the street, has a way of dropping other people's private tragedies into conversation, like she's giving you a weather report. Apparently, the wife just vanished one morning. No moving truck, no tearful goodbyes. She was just gone. Tammy said, divorce wasn't pretty. She left him cold, just up and disappeared. Some folks joked, half laughing, half not, that Craig had locked her in the basement or buried her under the garage. But no one ever said it like they really wanted an answer. About 3 months before things got weird, the HOA finally clamped down on Craig's operation. They'd been gunning for him for years, but someone, I'm guessing the guy with the new Tesla, filed a formal complaint about the fumes and the noise. One morning, there was a laminated letter duct-taped to Craig's rusted chain-link fence. Immediate cease of operation. In bold red letters. I passed by the next day and saw him sitting in a lawn chair in his driveway, just staring at the closed garage door. Not moving, not even blinking. He looked like a man watching his house burn from the inside out. That was the last time I saw him in daylight. After that, the garage door stayed shut. No more engine revs, no more scattered parts in the yard. Just silence. And not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that felt wrong, like something was being held in. A few weeks passed. People moved on. Craig had always been background noise in our little suburban life. But then, one morning, right before my shift, I stepped outside and stopped cold. There was a smell in the air. Not smoke, not gas. Something harsher. It hit the back of your throat like burning plastic mixed with nail polish remover. Chemical, artificial, wrong. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Neighbors were standing in their yards sniffing the air, exchanging uneasy glances. That's when I heard it. The sound. It was faint. You had to really focus to hear it. A low, steady humming, like a refrigerator running, but heavier. Almost rhythmic, like it had a pulse. It was coming from Craig's house. Tammy was already on her phone. That's when I knew it wasn't nothing. Tammy only calls for 2 reasons: neighborhood gossip or emergencies. By the time I left for work around 7 p.m., 2 fire trucks and a police SUV had parked in front of Craig's place. I slowed my car near the end of the block to watch. They hadn't gone inside yet. There was yellow caution tape going up, and one of the firefighters had a hazmat mask hanging from his neck. That was my first real clue that this wasn't a wiring issue or a kitchen fire. That humming, it was louder now. Heavy. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it had weight, like it was pressing into your chest. I remember putting my hand to the steering wheel and feeling it vibrate under my fingers. A few neighbors had their phones out, filming from a distance, but no one got close. Nobody wanted to. I drove off, not knowing that would be the last time anyone ever saw Craig. At work, I couldn't concentrate. I kept refreshing the local news on my phone, hoping for some update, but there was nothing. Just a short blurb. Possible chemical hazard under investigation in Henderson residential area. That was it. Around midnight, I finally got a text from Tammy. Just 1 sentence. They broke down the garage door. No details, no follow-up. Just that. I texted Tammy back asking what they'd found, but she didn't reply, not until the next morning. When I got home, the entire street was locked down. Fire department vans, unmarked black trucks, even a bomb squad vehicle blocking both ends of the block. I had to park 3 streets over and walk the rest of the way. My heart was hammering. Something was seriously wrong. Later that day, everything came out. Apparently, Craig had been building some kind of detonation system inside his house. Not just a homemade explosive in a basement kind of thing. This was complex, connected to multiple gas lines running up and down the entire street. It wasn't just dangerous, it was devastating. They said if it had gone off the way he planned, half the neighborhood would have been obliterated. But it didn't. The ignition system failed. Some jerry-rigged timing mechanism jammed at the last second. Dumb luck or divine intervention? Take your pick. That afternoon, I stood on my porch with a few other neighbors, all of us in stunned silence, watching as a man in a black jacket wheeled out what looked like a half-melted machine on a gurney. Wires everywhere, scorched metal. The thing looked like it had been part of a movie set. I stepped forward and asked one of the officers quietly, "Did you find Craig?" The guy didn't even look at me, just shook his head and muttered, "We haven't located the homeowner yet." That part still keeps me up sometimes. Craig's car was there. His front door was locked from the inside. No broken windows, no sign of forced entry or exit. No blood, no body, no note. Just that machine, a bunch of tangled wires, and a house filled with tools and chemical drums. It was like he'd disappeared in the middle of setting it all up. Some people think he fled before the authorities arrived, but how? I live 3 houses down. If he slipped out, I would have seen or heard something. Others think he planned to go out with the explosion, that it was a suicide mission, but he lost his nerve at the last second. Me? I'm not so sure he ever planned to leave that garage. I think something happened in there, something that made him stop or vanish. For weeks after that, our street felt wrong. Not in the supernatural way. It was real, physical, like the air itself was heavier. Sleep didn't come easy. The silence at night didn't feel restful. It felt loaded. The city sealed off Craig's house, metal panels over the windows and doors. the garage gutted, completely emptied. Rumor was that inside they found the insulation ripped from the walls, electrical wiring yanked out, sheetrock stripped to the studs, and notes, dozens of them, taped everywhere. Handwritten, scrawled in pen and marker, illegible in parts. Tammy said they looked like someone trying to map something out. Others said Craig was convinced someone was watching him through the power lines, that he thought the grid was alive. Some claimed he was building a signal jammer to block voices only he could hear. It sounded insane, but no one could deny how deliberate everything had been. This wasn't the ramblings of a man falling apart. It was a plan, a blueprint, and it almost worked. 2 weeks later, I was out walking my dog late at night. I don't know why I passed Craig's place. Curiosity, I guess. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that nothing was left, that it was just a house again. The metal panels were still up. The streetlight in front flickered, casting long, jerky shadows across the pavement. Then my dog froze, ears up, hackles raised, low growl rumbling in her throat. That's when I heard it, that sound, that same low humming vibration from before. Fainter this time, but still there. So quiet you'd think it was your imagination, unless you'd heard it before. And I had. I stood there, not moving, barely breathing. It was lower than before, deeper. Like it wasn't coming from the house anymore, but beneath it. Like it had sunk into the foundation, into the earth. I tugged the leash hard and walked away fast. My skin crawled the entire way home. I didn't sleep that night. Eventually, the city brought in engineers to clear the place out entirely. The official explanation was residual electrical interference from old equipment, a plausible enough story. But no one explained why Craig was never found. No surveillance footage of him leaving, his bank account untouched, no phone activity, no credit card usage, no fingerprints anywhere unusual. Just gone, like he dissolved into the concrete. Some families moved out not long after. The rest of us just stopped talking about it. Like if we ignored it long enough, the street would go back to normal. Like silence could smother the unease. But not for me. I still think about it. Every night when I drive past that house. The lawn's overgrown now. The panels are still up. And sometimes people say they hear it. That hum. Just for a second. A vibration at the edge of hearing. Like something breathing under the floor. Last week, a real estate company finally listed the property online. Didn't mention a thing about what happened. Just called it a great fixer-upper opportunity with a spacious garage, perfect for creative projects. I stared at the listing for a long time. I don't believe in ghosts, or demons, or monsters in closets, but I believe in obsession, in ideas that sink their claws into a person and don't let go. And something tells me that house isn't done yet. Whatever Craig was building, or trying to stop, is still in there, humming softly beneath the concrete, waiting, watching. And the scariest part? I don't think we'll ever find out what it really was, but someone will, and when they do, it won't end well. I moved into that condo last fall, a 2-bedroom just outside Phoenix. I was 36, recently divorced, and trying to piece my life back together without draining the last of my savings. The building was older, built in the late 80s, I think. You could hear everything through the walls. Coughs, toilets flushing, dogs barking. I figured that was just the trade-off for cheap rent in a decent neighborhood. I didn't know many of my neighbors. People mostly kept to themselves. The guy next door barely even made eye contact. I only heard his name once, Josh, I think, when the landlord mentioned him in passing. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, usually wore a baseball cap. That was all I really knew about him. From the first week, though, I started hearing strange noises coming from his side of the wall. At first, I thought it was just the old plumbing, muffled bangs, maybe pipes clanking. Sometimes there was this dragging sound, like furniture being scraped across the floor. and every now and then what sounded like someone crying. But I kept brushing it off. Maybe it was just a TV playing late, or someone dealing with a breakup. This building creaked constantly at night. It was easy to rationalize things when all you wanted was some sleep and peace of mind. I even remember one night, I paused my show, muted the volume just to listen. But the sound stopped. I think I actually laughed at myself. It's strange how good we get at convincing ourselves everything's normal when we need it to be. Then came the night I couldn't ignore it. It was around 10:30 p.m. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone when I heard a loud thump, sharp, sudden. Not like something fell. It sounded like an impact. A body hitting the wall. Then nothing. Just silence. I sat there, frozen, staring at the wall. Maybe a minute passed, and then I heard it. A woman's voice yelling, not crying, not muffled, screaming. "Please help me, somebody help." It was so loud it cut right through the drywall. My chest clenched. For a second I didn't move. My brain struggled to catch up with what I'd just heard. Then I shot up, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. I barely remember what I told them, just that someone was in danger next door, that I'd heard a woman screaming for help. When the cops arrived, I met them in the hallway, still in my sweatpants, heart hammering in my chest. I repeated what I'd heard. They knocked. No response. One of them tried the door. Locked. He radioed for backup, while the other started calling the building's maintenance line, hoping someone could come unlock it. From inside, I could hear movement. Something shifting. I said again. She was screaming. She said someone help her. One of the officers just muttered, "Screw it," and started kicking the door. It took 3, maybe 4 solid hits before it flew open. And the sound that came from inside, I'll never forget it. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't chaos. It was the absence of all that. Just silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Boots shuffled on the floor. One officer called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I couldn't see much from where I stood, just a narrow sliver through the door. But they were inside for a while before they brought her out. She looked like a ghost. Pale, thin, her eyes hollow like she hadn't slept in days. She wore a tank top and pajama pants. No shoes, zip ties still loose around her wrists. Her hands trembled as they led her out. She looked at me, no, through me, like I wasn't even real, like she was still somewhere else entirely. That look, God, I'll never forget it. It was the kind of look someone has when they've seen something they can't unsee, when they've survived something that should have broken them. One of the officers gently placed his hand on her back, guiding her out. Another ran to the squad car and came back with a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. She kept whispering something under her breath, repeating it over and over. But I couldn't make out the words. The cops didn't let me go back inside right away. I had to stay out in the hallway while they asked me questions. I told them everything I could, which wasn't much. Just the things I'd heard that night and the weird sounds over the past few weeks. I remember my voice trembling as I described it, still trying to process what had just happened. That's when one of the officers said something that hit me like a punch to the chest. She told us she's been in there for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That wall I'd been sleeping next to every single night. A woman had been behind it, tied up, trapped, held hostage by that guy, Josh, or whatever his real name was. Apparently he'd told a few neighbors she was out of town visiting family or on vacation. Meanwhile, he had her chained to a metal bed frame with blackout curtains covering the windows so no one could see in. That scream I heard that night. It was her last attempt. Her final push. She told the cops she didn't think she'd survive another night. Inside, they found empty water bottles and fast food wrappers littering the floor. No lights on. No furniture except the bed frame and an old chair. He'd taken her phone, shut off her access to everything. No way to call for help. No way out. What made it even more disturbing was what they pieced together after. He was leaving during the day and only coming back at night. Like it was some kind of twisted routine. A life he was living alongside the horror he was inflicting on her. like it was normal. They arrested him not long after. He got pulled over a few hours later trying to leave town. I didn't even see it happen. One of the neighbors filled me in the next day. But the part that's haunted me the most? It's how normal he seemed. Just a quiet guy with a backwards cap who barely spoke. Nothing threatening, nothing suspicious. And if I hadn't called, I still think about that all the time. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall, the same one she'd been behind, trying to understand how something so horrific could have been happening that close without me realizing. My stomach turned. I felt physically ill. Then came the guilt. The heavy kind. The kind that sticks to you and plays back everything you missed, every sound you ignored. Every time I turned up the TV, put in my earbuds, shut the world out. The dragging noises, the faint crying, all of it. I started wondering if she'd been trying to send signals the whole time and I'd just tuned them out. It messes with your head. You think you'll act fast in a situation like that. But when it's real, when it's happening right there, your brain doesn't want to believe it. It wants to cling to the idea that everything is fine. Because the truth is too horrifying to sit with. I didn't tell many people. Just my brother and one close friend. It felt too heavy to just drop into conversation. And honestly, I was still shaken. I kept thinking, what if no one had called? What if I hadn't been home? What if I'd just kept ignoring it, assuming it was plumbing or late-night TV? She would still be in there. Or worse. And the truth is, I almost didn't call. I hesitated, even after hearing her scream. A part of me was afraid I was overreacting, afraid I'd bother the police for nothing. That thought still haunts me. How close I came to doing nothing. A couple of weeks later, I broke my lease. I couldn't stay. Every creak, every noise made me jump. I couldn't stop picturing her in that room, terrified, tied up, waiting for someone to help. The landlord didn't give me any trouble. I think they just wanted to move on and bury it. But the unit next door stayed empty for a long time. No one wanted to live there after that. I couldn't blame them. That wall, it never felt like just drywall again. It became something else entirely. A reminder of how blind we can be to the horrors unfolding right next to us. Even now, whenever I move into a new place, I check the walls. I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't help it. If I hear something weird, anything, I stop what I'm doing and I listen. I don't brush it off anymore. I'd rather be wrong and embarrassed than right and silent. That experience changed me. It changed how I see everything. We're all so wrapped up in our own routines, our music, our shows, our screens. We tune out the world around us. We don't notice the screams unless they're loud. And even then, we hesitate. Because we want to believe everything is safe, predictable. But sometimes it just isn't. The weirdest part? After the arrest, after the cops, the neighbors, the news vans, it all stopped. No more crying. No more dragging sounds. Nothing. Just silence. And that silence, it still creeps me out more than anything else, because it reminds me of how easily something awful can hide in plain sight, and how little we really know about the people living just one wall away. I don't talk about this much. Honestly, whenever I've tried, people either brush it off or get visibly uncomfortable and steer the conversation elsewhere. But this memory, it's been wedged in my brain for years, like a splinter I can't dig out. Maybe writing it down will help me finally put it to rest. I was 17 at the time, still living with my parents in a quiet suburb just outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. One of those places where neighbors wave politely but don't actually talk to each other, where every lawn looks the same and nothing ever really happens. That summer was brutally hot and achingly slow, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick, where you break a sweat just standing in the shade. The only remotely interesting thing going on was this new girl, Sarah. She'd just moved in across the street with her parents, 15, full of this bright, chatty energy that felt totally out of place in our sleepy neighborhood. She always wore oversized t-shirts, scuffed Vans, and had this big, effortless smile that made you like her whether you wanted to or not. We weren't exactly friends, but we'd exchange casual hellos now and then. Sometimes she'd wave while I was mowing the lawn or call out a quick "hey" if we crossed paths while I walked the dog. Just neighborhood stuff. Then there was Mr. Delaney. He lived at the end of our block in this weather-stained rancher with a sagging porch. I never knew his first name, nobody did. He must have been in his late 60s, maybe older, and looked like someone who'd just stopped trying. Same gray windbreaker every single day, even in the dead heat of July. His hair was wiry and overgrown like he hadn't been to a barber in years. He didn't seem dangerous, just off. Slow, maybe. He'd shuffle along the sidewalk with his eyes locked on the pavement, shoulders slumped like he was carrying some invisible weight. If you greeted him, he'd freeze for half a second, like the words had to fight their way through some fog in his head. Then he'd offer this small, twitchy smile and nod before continuing on. Sarah, though, she talked to him. A lot. More than anyone else, really. I'd see them from my window or during dog walks, her sitting on his porch rail, him in his usual chair, the two of them deep in conversation. It never looked creepy. She didn't seem afraid of him. If anything, it looked like she felt sorry for him. Then one day, she vanished. Just like that. No warnings, no screams, no broken windows or tire marks in the street. Gone. I remember that Monday like it was scorched into my skin. The humidity was unbearable, like the air was pressing down on you. At dinner, my mom mentioned she hadn't seen Sarah outside in a few days. It struck me as odd, but not alarming. Not yet. By Tuesday morning, there were 2 cop cars parked outside her house. I looked through my blinds and saw her parents on the lawn. Her mom was pacing in circles. Her dad just sat on the steps with his face in his hands. One of the officers was going door to door asking if anyone had seen Sarah after Saturday night. I hadn't. But something about the whole situation made my stomach knot. The way the air felt still and electric, like a thunderstorm was coming even though the sky was clear. Then came the whispers. Some neighbors said she must have run away. Others were convinced she'd gotten into a stranger's car. The theories spread fast, but nothing concrete. Not until about a week later, when Joanne, who lived 2 houses down from Mr. Delaney, told the police something that changed everything. She said she'd seen Sarah walk into Delaney's house around dusk that Saturday. Said she didn't think anything of it at the time because she'd seen them chatting before. But the disturbing part? No one saw her leave. Not that night. Not ever. Another neighbor came forward with the same thing. They saw her go in but never out. That's when everything shifted. It was like someone flipped a switch. More cops arrived. Crime scene tape went up around Delaney's property. The whole block fell into this eerie, watchful silence. People stood behind their curtains, whispering and watching. But Delaney, he didn't react. He just sat in that faded plastic lawn chair on his porch, rocking gently, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Like the swarm of investigators digging through his yard wasn't even real. Like none of it concerned him. There was no anger, no fear, not even confusion. Just that same vacant stare and the slow creak of the chair beneath him. They brought in dogs, started digging. First the backyard, then the garage. At one point, they were even crawling under the porch. I stood at the edge of the curb with a cluster of neighbors, all of us locked in that same stunned silence. None of us said it, but we all felt it in our bones. Something was deeply wrong. Still, Delaney didn't move, didn't speak. Then, late in the afternoon, they opened the front door to his house. I remember that sound with perfect clarity, this long, high-pitched creak, like the wood itself was trying to warn them not to enter. It made this groaning noise, like a door that hadn't been opened in years, not just creaky but reluctant, like the house itself didn't want to let anyone in. I couldn't see much from where I stood across the street, But I remember this sudden cold in my stomach. My whole body tensed up, like it already knew something was terribly wrong. Nobody had said anything yet, but it was like my instincts were screaming. They stayed inside for hours. No shouting, no slamming of doors or hurried footsteps, just quiet movements, muffled voices over radios, and the occasional shadow passing behind the curtains. Then an unmarked white van pulled up. That's when everything shifted. One of the officers came out pale as a sheet, talking quickly into his phone. Within minutes, more vehicles started arriving. Detectives, forensics, people in full suits and gloves, the kind you only see on TV when something really bad has happened. The cops pushed the neighbors back down the block, told us it was for our own safety. I tried to stay close, to pick up on anything, but eventually an officer came over and told me I needed to go home. "We'll release information soon," he said, but his face told a different story. Something grim he wasn't allowed to say out loud. That night, lights stayed on inside Delaney's house until well past midnight. Figures in white moved in and out carrying boxes and sealed containers, their expressions unreadable. But the most unsettling part? They didn't bring Delaney out. Not for hours. When they finally did, it was almost sunrise. The next morning it hit the news. Local channels ran it as "Missing teen linked to local man's home." Somehow the media already had pieces of the story. They reported that police had found a concealed room in Delaney's basement. Not just hidden, sealed from the inside. That detail messed me up more than anything. How does a room get sealed from the inside? Who sealed it? Why? And what was in there? The article didn't offer answers. The police refused to confirm much, only saying the investigation was ongoing. But sources claimed they'd found personal belongings. Sarah's backpack, some of her clothes, maybe even her phone. But not Sarah. She was still missing. That's when the neighborhood lost it. Parents started keeping their kids indoors. Some families packed up and left town for a while. Delaney was taken into custody, but the last anyone saw of him, he looked vacant. Not confused, not scared, just hollow. Like he had no idea what any of it meant. Or maybe like he didn't care. They never charged him with murder. Only unlawful detainment. That's all they could prove. And while rumors started flying around, like wildfire, nothing official ever came out. People whispered about what they might have found. Chains bolted to the floor, a stained mattress, a bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Some even said there were deep scratch marks on the inside of the walls, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I don't know what's true and what's neighborhood horror lore, but what I do know is this. Sarah was never found. And after a few weeks, the questions started piling up faster than the answers. If that room was sealed from the inside, how did her things get in there? Why didn't anyone hear anything? No screams, no banging, nothing. Just silence. The city eventually boarded up the house and it sat empty after that. But people claimed to see things, lights flickering in the windows when no one was inside. One night someone said they heard crying. A girl's voice, soft and far away. I don't know if I believe that, but after everything that happened, I can't say it's impossible either. I only walked by that house once after it all. I didn't mean to. It was months later and I'd taken a different route home without thinking. I didn't realize where I was until I looked up and saw it. The boards were still up, but something new caught my eye. Deep scratches along the wooden frame of the basement window. Long, frantic-looking gouges, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. My whole chest tightened. My brain couldn't even fully process what I was seeing. I just stood there, frozen, staring at those marks until a passing car jolted me out of it. I turned around and walked home as fast as I could. That was the last time I ever went near that end of the block. Years have passed. I moved away, left that town behind. But I still think about Sarah, about how someone like her, so vibrant, always smiling, could just disappear. No trace, no explanation, and the worst part? It happened in a house we all walked past every single day. Delaney ended up in some kind of facility, They said he wasn't mentally competent to stand trial. Last I heard, he died in his sleep. Never gave a confession. Never said a word about the room. Just gone. Like he took all the answers with him. And that's the part that haunts me. It didn't build slowly. It didn't escalate over time. 1 minute she was there, waving from across the street. And the next, she was gone. Like the universe hiccuped. Like reality glitched and erased her. No warning, no closure. Sometimes I lie awake wondering if she's still out there somewhere. Other times I imagine her in that room, alone, terrified, waiting for someone to open the door. But the thought I can't ever seem to shake is that feeling I had standing on the sidewalk that day, watching the cops go in, like something evil had been there all along, right under our noses, and we never saw it. I moved into that apartment off campus during my junior year. It was one of those cheap rentals students grab because it's close to campus, and the landlord doesn't ask questions. He didn't care how many of us lived there, as long as the rent came in on time. There were 4 of us: me, Rachel, Jamie, and Lauren. The place was old and kind of falling apart. Peeling paint, sticky cabinet doors, mismatched tiles. But it worked, barely. The walls were ridiculously thin. You could hear everything. Dogs barking 2 streets over, traffic from the main road, people yelling at all hours. But the worst noise always came from the unit next to us. 2 older men lived there. We never really talked to them, not even a nod in the hallway. Still, we heard them through the walls almost nightly. Loud arguments, things crashing, sometimes screaming, always around 3 a.m. We joked about it at first, called it the night fights. It became this weird ritual. If someone heard it, they'd text the group chat. They're at it again. We'd laugh it off, share memes, maybe knock on each other's doors for a sleepy debrief. But as the semester wore on, it stopped feeling funny. The screaming got worse. It wasn't the kind of yelling where 2 people were fighting. Sometimes it sounded like one person crying out in pain or fear and the other just quiet. Not yelling back, not reacting, just calm, or maybe just listening. That silence, it made everything worse. One night I pressed my ear to the wall during one of those episodes. The screaming had stopped suddenly, and then I heard whispering. Not just a few words. Whispering that went on and on. Soft and steady. Like a prayer or a chant. I don't even know how long I stood there like that, frozen. I was only pulled out of it when Rachel walked in behind me and said, what are you doing?" I jumped. I didn't even hear her come in. I just shook my head and backed away from the wall, muttering something about the guys next door. Behind our apartment was a narrow alley choked with overgrown trees and lined with a broken chain-link fence. It was pitch black at night. Raccoons would knock over the trash cans back there, so we were used to random clattering, weird scratching sounds. But one night, something felt different. I went to bed around midnight like usual. Then, sometime just before 3 a.m., I woke up like someone had yanked me out of a dream. No sound, nothing, just an eerie stillness. Then, tap, tap. It came from my window, soft, deliberate. I froze. My room's on the ground floor and my bed sits right against the wall under the window. At first I thought maybe it was a branch tapping in the wind, but the sound was too regular, too human, like fingernails. I held my breath, staring at the curtains. I didn't move, not an inch. I just listened. Tap, tap, tap. It went on for, I don't know how long, a minute, 5. Time stopped. Then it finally ceased, and I slowly sat up, barely making a sound. I didn't pull the curtain back. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see on the other side. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, slow, moving away. Not raccoons, not animals. These were heavy human footsteps crunching on dirt and leaves. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went outside and checked under my window. The ground was soft from the rain earlier that week, and I saw footprints. Big ones. Way too big to belong to any of the girls. I called the others out and showed them. Jamie tried to laugh. Maybe someone was drunk, wandered through the alley, got confused. But I knew better. It felt too intentional, too precise. That same afternoon, around lunch, we saw a police car parked out front. Not super unusual for our neighborhood, honestly. Stuff happened around here. But this time, the officers walked up to the apartment next door, the one with the screams. They knocked, and after a minute or so, one of the older men answered. Big guy, probably late 50s, heavy-set with this annoyed look on his face like they'd interrupted his nap. But he didn't fight them. No shouting, no fuss. Just nodded, turned around, and let them cuff him. They led him out, calm as ever. We stood there in our doorway just watching like a bunch of stunned idiots. One of the officers glanced over at us but didn't say anything. Just got in the car with the guy and drove off. You'd think that would be the end of it. But that night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the tapping on my window, the whispering behind the wall, the calm way that man walked out with the police. Around 2:45 a.m., I sat upright in bed, completely awake, heart pounding for no reason at all. I was lying in bed wide awake when I heard something. A faint creak outside, almost too soft to be real. I froze. My room was dark, lit only by the dull glow of my phone screen. I grabbed it like a lifeline and slowly inched toward the window. This time I didn't just listen. I slid the curtain open. Just a crack. Nothing. Just the backyard. The broken fence. Trees swaying gently in the early morning breeze. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared out for what must have been 10 full minutes, barely blinking, every shadow looking suspicious. Eventually, I forced myself back into bed. Somehow, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was waking to the sound of knocking, sharp and steady, at the front door. It was around 6 a.m. The sunlight spilled across the floor, too warm and bright for how cold I felt inside. I cracked the front door, still half asleep, and standing there was a police officer, not one of the ones from the day before. He asked politely if he could come in and speak with all four of us. Said it wouldn't take long. His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. We gathered in the living room, still groggy and confused, and let him talk. He started by saying they'd arrested the man next door, one of the two we'd always heard through the wall. Apparently he'd assaulted a woman in another part of town the week before, but that wasn't why he was there. He said when they searched the guy's phone, they found photographs. That got our attention. Then he looked at me, directly at me, and said something that made my stomach drop. They found pictures of a window, my bedroom window, taken from the outside. Not just one, multiple shots from different nights. I remember whispering, "How do you know it was mine?" The officer didn't hesitate. The floral curtains, they're visible in every photo. I couldn't speak. I just sat there frozen. I didn't feel like a person in that moment. Just a target. A thing. Something someone had watched. The officer went on. Said they hadn't found any signs of entry, but the window frame showed clear tool marks. Someone had tried to pry it open. That was it for me. I packed a bag that afternoon and stayed at a friend's place across town. I couldn't go back into that room without my hands shaking. The idea that someone had stood outside my window, taking pictures of me while I slept, maybe even trying to get in, it made my skin crawl. But the worst part? The guy they arrested wasn't even the only one who lived there, and no one ever saw the second man again. We tried asking the landlord, asked who the other tenant was. He just shrugged and said as far as he knew, only one person was listed on the lease. Rent was always paid in cash. No complaints. No reason to inspect. He looked genuinely confused when we pressed him. The police came back a couple more times with follow-up questions, but nothing ever came of it. No charges related to the window. No answers about the second man, just more loose ends. The apartment next door stayed empty after that. Nobody ever came to clean it out. No movers, no trash on the curb, just silence. One day the unit was buzzing with noise, and the next, it was like it had been abandoned. Even after I came back to our place, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in my room again. I dragged my mattress into the living room and kept it there for the rest of the semester. It felt safer somehow, being near the others. We bought a cheap motion sensor camera and installed it in the backyard just in case. For a while, nothing happened. Then, about 2 weeks later, it recorded something. Just a few seconds of footage, but enough. A shape, blurry, human, standing near the fence. Not moving, just watching. And then it was gone. The motion light had turned on, flooding the yard. We ran outside within seconds. No one was there. We brought the footage to the cops. They said they'd keep it on file, but didn't sound too hopeful. Said it could have been a shadow, someone passing through, maybe nothing at all. But I knew better. After that, I stopped opening the blinds, even during the day. Knowing someone had taken pictures from the outside made me feel constantly exposed, like the entire back wall was glass and I was always being watched. I even started sleeping with music on, just something to fill the silence. Every creak made me jump. Every soft sound outside sent my heart racing. I couldn't relax, couldn't feel safe in my own home. And it was worse because there was never a full explanation. No closure, just scattered fragments that didn't add up. A missing tenant, a man with photos of my window, tool marks on the frame, and silence. The police never followed up again. The unit next door stayed locked. The landlord didn't even try to rent it out. It's been over a year now. I've moved to a different city, a different apartment, but I still check my windows every night before I sleep. I still keep curtains closed and double-check the locks. I still catch myself listening when I wake up around 3:01 a.m., just in case I hear that tapping again. It happened last spring, toward the end of March. I was living in a small aging apartment complex just outside of Tacoma, Washington, with my 2 kids, Emily, who had just turned 6, and Noah, who was 4. My husband had left for an overseas work assignment a few weeks earlier, so it was just the 3 of us. I was doing my best to keep things together, school drop-offs, bedtime routines, working remotely during the day. It wasn't ideal, but we'd fallen into a rhythm that at the time felt manageable. That night, like every other, I got the kids tucked in by 8:30. Emily insisted on 2 bedtime stories, and Noah wanted me to check under the bed for monsters, something he never used to ask for until his dad left. After they were asleep, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and flopped onto the couch, half watching some forgettable true crime docuseries on Netflix, just trying to wind down. Then, at 1 a.m., I heard it, the buzzer from the front entrance of the building. A harsh metallic sound that cut through the quiet like a blade. It's the kind you press when you need someone to buzz you in from the outside. I live on the 3rd floor, and our system doesn't have any intercom or camera, just the noise. No way to talk back. No way to see who it is. At first I figured someone must have hit the wrong apartment. Maybe drunk. Maybe lost. I waited for a follow-up buzz that never came. Still, something about it got under my skin. It wasn't just the sound. It was how wrong it felt. Like the air shifted. I tried to brush it off, turned the volume up, and went back to my show. But the unease stuck with me. It was like my body knew something before my brain did. My skin too tight, like it was shrinking around me. Eventually, I turned off the TV and crawled into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening for any more sounds. Nothing. The next night it happened again. 1:06 a.m., a single buzz. Same as before. I froze on the couch, eyes locked on the door, every muscle in my body tense. Again, no knock, no footsteps in the hallway. Just that hollow, echoing silence afterward. My heart was hammering. I laid there awake for hours, staring at the shadows moving across the ceiling, trying to rationalize it away. Just a coincidence, I told myself. A technical glitch. Someone leaning on the button by mistake. But the next day I couldn't shake it. That pit in my stomach was still there. Heavy, growing. So I brought it up with Mrs. Gallagher, my downstairs neighbor. She's in her late 60s, lives alone, and always has fresh lavender by her door. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did your buzzer go off the last couple nights, around 1 in the morning?" She shook her head. "Nope, didn't hear a thing. Why, did yours?" I nodded slowly. "Twice now." Mrs. Gallagher raised an eyebrow, but didn't say much else. Just gave me that tight-lipped smile older women use when they're trying not to scare you. That's when the anxiety really sank in. If it was a random person pressing buttons, wouldn't someone else have heard it too? Later that evening, I asked the kids if they'd heard anything weird. Emily said no without looking up from her coloring book. Noah just shrugged and said, "I had a bad dream." That night, I found him curled up in bed with Emily. He hadn't asked permission. He just went there. That's not like him. Then came the third night. It was worse. The first buzz came early, 10:03 p.m., just one. Sharp and loud. I was in the kitchen cleaning up dinner plates when it happened, and I dropped a fork. It clanged against the tile, echoing through the space. I stood there, frozen, just listening. Nothing followed. Then again at 1:11 a.m., another buzz. This time, I didn't move right away. I just sat there on the edge of my bed, clutching my phone in one hand, my other hand gripping the blanket so tightly it hurt. Every light in the apartment was off except the hallway nightlight. My breath felt stuck somewhere between my chest and throat. Finally, I forced myself up and tiptoed into the living room. I parted the blinds just enough to see out. There was someone standing by the bushes across the street. Not walking, not pacing, just standing. They were dressed in black, wearing a hood pulled low. The streetlight nearby flickered slightly, making everything look even more distorted. I couldn't make out their face, but I swear, they were facing my building, watching. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I stayed in bed, every sound amplified in the dark, pipes creaking, wind brushing against the windows, the occasional distant car. I kept my phone clutched in my hand, thumb hovering over 911, heart pounding so loudly it felt like it was shaking the room. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Mike, the property manager. He's in his mid-50s, always smells like stale coffee and that musky cedar cologne guys wear when they want to seem outdoorsy. I told him everything, about the buzzing, about the figure I saw, about how it kept happening at the same time every night. He let out a long sigh like I was overreacting. "Probably just a kid messing around," he said. "Or a homeless guy. You know how it gets around here sometimes. I'll keep an eye out, but it's probably nothing." "Mike," I said, trying to steady my voice, "this isn't just some prank, it's 3 nights in a row, the exact same time, and someone was standing outside watching the building." He chuckled lightly, like he was trying to calm me down. "I get it, I really do. But unless there's damage or a break-in, there's not a lot I can do." I hung up, furious and afraid. I knew what I saw. And more than that, I felt it. That deep, visceral kind of dread that makes it hard to think straight. Like your body is already bracing for something and all you can do is wait. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I didn't go to bed that night. I couldn't. I made myself stay up, sitting in the living room near the front window, all the lights off. My phone was clenched in one hand, a flashlight in the other, thumb twitching against the power button. I kept the kids with me in my bedroom, locked the door behind us and piled a few chairs against it, just in case. They were both fast asleep in my bed, unaware of the anxiety curling tighter and tighter in my chest like a fist that wouldn't unclench. Sure enough, right around 1 a.m., the buzzer went off again. But this time, it wasn't alone. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside, slow, dragging. like someone didn't care about being quiet, like they wanted to be heard. I froze. My whole body tensed. I couldn't even breathe. For a moment, I thought maybe I was imagining it, that my mind was playing tricks on me from too little sleep and too much fear. But then I heard it again. A shuffle. The faint scrape of a shoe. I got up, every step toward the door feeling like I was sinking into concrete. I leaned toward the peephole praying I'd see nothing. But there was someone, standing just feet away on the other side of the door. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark hoodie pulled low and what looked like gloves on their hands. They weren't moving, just standing there, waiting. I backed away as quietly as I could, barely daring to breathe. My fingers trembled as I grabbed my phone. I called 911. It was hard to even press the buttons. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. When the dispatcher picked up, I whispered into the phone, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's someone outside my apartment," I said. "He's right outside my door. I have 2 small kids with me." She was calm, thank God. She told me to stay where I was, to stay quiet, and that police were already in the area. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Every second felt like a lifetime. I sat on the floor beside the bed, phone pressed to my ear, eyes locked on the hallway. I don't know how long I sat there like that. It felt like hours. Realistically, it was probably 10, maybe 15 minutes. At one point, I heard the person knock, softly, on a neighbor's door down the hall. Then nothing. Just silence again, until a sudden loud bang echoed from downstairs. The front entrance. The police had arrived. A few minutes later, officers were outside my apartment. When I opened the door, my knees nearly gave out from the relief. But the hallway was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. Still, they found something. Pry marks on the window in Noah's room. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even gone in there that night. Both kids had slept with me. If they hadn't. An officer named Ramirez, probably in his early 30s, walked me through what he found. He was gentle about it, but the way he spoke, it made it real. "Looks like someone tried to lift the window from the outside," he said, squatting next to it. "Didn't manage to get it all the way open. See here?" He pointed to the frame. There were marks, scratches, even a bit of chipped paint. But what really made my blood run cold were the faint smudges on the glass. Fingerprints. Tiny ones, right next to where my son's head would have been if he were sleeping in that bed. The officers swept the entire property. Flashlights moved across every corner of the narrow pathways, the hedges behind the dumpster. They checked the laundry room, the bike racks, even the maintenance shed. Around 3:00 a.m., another knock. This time it was Ramirez again, his face pale, his voice more serious than before. "We found something," he said. He led me downstairs to the basement storage room, the one that's supposed to be locked, the one no tenant uses because it smells like mildew and burnt wiring. Someone had been living down there. They found an old sleeping bag spread out in the corner, a half-empty backpack, crushed snack wrappers, an empty water bottle, and worst of all, what was inside a black drawstring bag tucked behind a stack of boxes. Inside were gloves, wire cutters, a roll of duct tape, a flashlight, and a small, unmarked spray bottle filled with a clear liquid, and a notebook. Small, beat up. The pages were filled with scribbles, apartment numbers, notes on which units responded to buzzers, and then I saw it. My name, my full name, written 3 times. Turns out someone had been living in that basement for at least a week, maybe longer. He'd found a way in through the garage, which Mike later admitted hadn't locked properly in months. He was using the buzzers to study people, to figure out who was awake, who looked through their blinds, who turned on their lights. The single buzz was a test. The second was confirmation. They think that's how he chose his targets. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. I sat up on the couch with the kitchen knife beside me, every light in the apartment on. Every noise, pipes creaking, neighbors walking above me, the fridge kicking on, felt like an intrusion. I barely ate. I barely breathed. 2 nights later, they found him, hiding behind a dumpster, just 2 buildings over. He was wearing the same black hoodie. His name was Brett Hammond. He had a record, petty theft, trespassing, and an old restraining order from a woman in Oregon. I didn't go to the court hearing. I couldn't bring myself to even think about being in the same room as him. All I knew was that he'd been watching us, watching me, and if I hadn't kept the kids in my room that night, I don't let myself finish that thought. We moved 2 weeks later. New apartment, new locks, new everything. Now I triple-check the windows every night. I keep the buzzer volume turned all the way down. I can't stand the sound of it, it turns my stomach. I never told the kids the full story. Just said someone was sneaking around and the police handled it. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and that old creeping anxiety starts to set in again, I think about those tiny fingerprints on the glass. And I wonder how many times he stood there, just watching us. I was 24 and in my second year of nursing school when it happened. I'd moved to Milwaukee a few months earlier and was renting a room in one of those old 4-unit houses near campus. It wasn't anything fancy, peeling paint, creaky floors, but it was cheap and mostly quiet, which was all I needed with the night shifts and endless study sessions. The house had 2 apartments on the upper floor and 2 below. I lived in the upper left unit. Across the narrow hallway from me was a guy named Ian. I only knew his name because a package for him got delivered to my door by mistake one evening. That was the only reason I even knew he existed. Ian was quiet. Not the awkward but polite kind of quiet. More like he wasn't really there. He never made eye contact. Never said hi. Just sort of drifted. Sometimes I'd pass him in the hallway and my stomach would tighten, like I'd just walked under a cold draft. I told myself I was just overtired or being paranoid from lack of sleep. Ian always wore a hoodie. Always. Even on the warmer days in late spring when I'd be sweating just walking up the stairs. I never saw him with anyone. No friends, no visitors, not even a food delivery. His door was always locked, always shut, and somehow that made that side of the hall feel colder. Not physically colder, just off. Like something heavy was pressing against the air itself. But it was the nights when things really started to feel wrong. It began with the faint sound of music drifting through the wall around 2 crown or 3 mon a.m. Not songs exactly, more like lullabies played in slow motion or ambient tracks that made the hairs on your neck rise. Then came the sounds of furniture scraping against the floor, like something heavy was being dragged. But I never heard him walking around. No footsteps, no talking, just those dragging sounds. And then the crying started. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even obvious at first. Just soft, muffled sobs, like someone trying not to be heard. They would come and go in strange intervals. I honestly thought maybe Ian was grieving. Maybe he was dealing with depression or had lost someone close. I felt bad for even being creeped out. But the more I listened, the more something about it felt unnatural. The crying wasn't random. It followed a rhythm almost like it was rehearsed. Timed. That's what started to unsettle me the most. Then came the smell. I'll never forget it. It hit me the second I stepped into the hallway one morning. This thick, rancid stench. Mildew, sweat, and something sharp and metallic underneath like pennies soaked in warm water. Like blood. I opened all my windows, thinking maybe a pipe had burst or something had died in the walls. But it just got worse. The next day I finally texted Dave, our landlord, who lived in one of the downstairs units. I told him the smell was bad and that it seemed to be coming from across the hall. He texted back saying he'd come by the next afternoon to check it out. That night I barely slept. The crying returned, but it sounded different, closer. It wasn't muffled by walls anymore. It was as if whoever was making the noise had moved closer to the door. Or maybe they knew help was coming. The next afternoon around 2 p.m. I heard someone coming up the stairs. My clinical rotation had been canceled that day, and I was relieved I didn't have to be alone when Dave showed up. I stepped out into the hallway just as he hit the top step. He smelled it immediately. I saw the way his face changed, eyebrows pinched, lips pressing together like he was trying not to gag. Dave knocked on Ian's door, called his name once, twice. Nothing. "I haven't seen him leave in days," I said quietly, arms crossed over my chest. Dave glanced at me, then turned back to the door. "Screw it," he muttered, and pulled out his ring of keys. The first one didn't fit. His jaw tightened. "He must have changed the lock," he said like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. Tenants aren't supposed to do that without permission. That's when Dave stepped back, gave the door a hard shove with his shoulder, and the frame cracked as it popped open. The smell hit us like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, covering my nose and mouth, eyes watering instantly. Dave pulled his sleeve over his face and stepped inside. I hesitated, heart pounding, then followed a few seconds later, holding my breath. The air inside felt wrong. Not just the stench, something else, like the room itself didn't want us there. It was dark. The curtains were drawn tight, and the only light came from a single old lamp on the floor, casting long, warped shadows across the room. Just enough illumination to make out vague shapes, and something else. There were clothes everywhere, scattered across the floor like they'd been dropped mid-motion. Food containers were piled in one corner, some still half full, others rotting. And in the center of the room was a mattress. No bed frame, no sheets, just a filthy mattress on the floor. At first I thought it was empty, but as I stepped closer I saw her, a girl. She couldn't have been more than 15, maybe 16. She was curled up, lying still on her side, her wrists zip-tied to one end of the bed frame, ankles too. A thin, stained blanket barely covered her. She didn't even flinch when we came in, didn't look at us. Her face was pale, hollow, almost expressionless. Her eyes were open but distant, like she wasn't really there. I froze. Dave just stood in the doorway whispering, "Oh my God. Oh my God." Over and over, like his brain couldn't catch up to what he was seeing. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. My thoughts jammed like gears grinding against each other, my body stiff as stone. Then she turned her head slightly, just slightly, and in the softest voice I've ever heard, she said, "Please don't shut the door." That snapped everything back into motion. I don't even remember grabbing my phone or dialing 911. One moment I was staring at her, the next my hands were trembling as I spoke to the dispatcher, my voice unsteady, saying, "There's a girl tied up in my neighbor's room." The cops got there fast, really fast, within minutes. They stormed in, cleared the place, got her out. I watched from the hallway as paramedics wrapped her in a blanket and led her away. She didn't say anything, just stared forward with those hollow eyes. We all had to give statements. Police questioned me, Dave, even the neighbors downstairs. Turned out, the girl was a runaway from a nearby town. Ian had met her online, pretended to be a teenager too, lured her in, and he'd kept her there, locked in that room for weeks. Weeks. I'd been living across the hall, sleeping, eating, studying, brushing my teeth, while she was trapped in that room, just feet away, right on the other side of that door. After the ambulance pulled away and the cops packed up, everything felt surreal. The hallway looked the same. The walls hadn't changed. But something inside me had. I couldn't stop picturing her lying there. Couldn't stop replaying the sounds, the smells, the feeling I'd ignored. The guilt hit me like a slow-building wave that never fully crashed. I'd heard things. Crying. I'd smelled it. I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing. Not until it got unbearable. That guilt still sits in my stomach like a stone. I keep thinking, what if I had knocked on that door a week earlier? What if I'd just asked? Would she have whispered to me too? Would Ian have panicked? Would it have made a difference? They didn't find Ian for 3 more days. He'd vanished before Dave forced the door, which meant He probably knew someone was coming. He'd gotten ahead of it. They eventually found him holed up in a storage unit a few miles away. I saw his mugshot online. Same dead stare, same hoodie, calm, expressionless, like he couldn't even grasp the gravity of what he'd done. When they called me in to give a full statement, I had to relive every moment, every sound I'd brushed off, every time I'd put on headphones to drown out the crying, every time I chose not to act. For days after, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I moved out 2 weeks later. Didn't wait for the lease to end. I begged my cousin to let me crash on her couch. I didn't pack much, just what I could throw in a duffel bag. That building, that hallway, I can't explain how much it warped my sense of safety. You always think you'd know if something horrible was happening next to you, that your instincts would kick in, that you'd sense the evil, but you don't. People like him don't walk around with signs on their foreheads. They live next door. They keep quiet. They stay invisible. And we tell ourselves it's not our business, until it is. Until a door opens and the truth comes pouring out like rot. I think about her sometimes. I don't know her name. No one ever told me. I don't know where she is now or what kind of life she's trying to rebuild, but I hope she's okay. I hope someone is seeing her, truly seeing her, and making her feel safe again. As for me, I don't ignore anything anymore. If I hear a strange sound, I check. If something smells off, I don't write it off as old pipes or weird neighbors. I ask. I knock. I call. Because I can't unsee what I saw that day. And I'll never forget how easy it was to live right next to a nightmare, without even realizing it until it was too late. I'm not usually the type to post personal stuff online, definitely not something like this. But what happened to me last year still keeps me up some nights. And I don't know, maybe putting it into words, even anonymously, might help. My name's Chris. I'm 41. After my divorce, I moved into a modest little duplex on the north side of Jacksonville. Quiet neighborhood, mostly older folks. The kind of place where people give you a wave from their porches but don't ask questions. That suited me fine. I wasn't looking to make friends, I just wanted to lay low and rebuild. I was renting the left unit. The right side belonged to a man named Gary. He looked like he was pushing 70, always had this beat-up baseball cap on, even when mowing the lawn at sunset. We'd exchanged a few hellos, a nod here and there, but he wasn't much of a talker. Again, fine by me. I was in a keep-to-myself chapter of life. Out back, there was a detached garage. Nothing fancy. Old wooden structure, paint peeling, 2 creaky doors, and a single floodlight bolted above the entrance. I used it mostly for storage. Tools, some moving boxes, my bike, and all the miscellaneous junk you accumulate when a marriage ends. One night in early November, I came home after grabbing a burger from this 24-hour spot. It was around 10:30 p.m. I parked, stepped out, and saw the garage light was on. That caught me off guard. I knew. I'd turned it off before leaving. I double-checked that kind of stuff now. Living alone again made me paranoid in a cautious way. I walked around the side yard, unlocked the door, and peeked in. Everything looked fine. Nothing out of place. No mess, no signs of a break-in. Still, something felt off, like the air was holding its breath. I switched the light off, locked up again, and told myself I probably forgot. I'd been scatterbrained lately. Divorce does that. The next morning, I headed out to the garage to grab a wrench, and the moment I opened the door, my gut twisted. One of the drawers on my tool chest was halfway open. Another one looked like someone had rummaged through it. A small box of screws had spilled across the floor, and my box cutter, it was gone. That was the first thing I knew wasn't my doing. I'm meticulous with tools. I'd never just misplaced something like that. I checked the lock again. Still intact, windows unbroken, no signs of forced entry. My mind started racing. Could a kid have snuck in? But how? The place was secure. Then I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I left the drawer open. Maybe the box of screws fell. I walked back inside, tried to get on with my day, but the more I thought about it, the more that crawling unease took over. That afternoon, I drove down to the hardware store and picked up one of those cheap motion sensor cameras. Nothing fancy, just something I could aim toward the garage from the corner of the yard. I wasn't expecting to catch anything, I just needed some peace of mind. For the next few nights it was uneventful, just clips of squirrels, raccoons, and one very persistent stray cat who kept sniffing around the trash bin. Then came the fourth night. It was around 3:12 a.m. I was reviewing the footage in bed, half asleep, when the motion alert came through. I tapped the screen, and what I saw made my stomach plummet. There, moving slowly across the camera's view, was a man. He came from behind the garage, tall, deliberate in his steps. The footage wasn't high resolution, but it was clear enough. He approached the back panel of the garage, knelt down, and slipped inside, through a section of the wood siding that had been loosened. I paused the footage and just stared. My skin felt like it was buzzing. I zoomed in. It was Gary. Same slouched posture, same old baseball cap. The way he moved wasn't frantic like someone caught in the act. It was slow, familiar, like he'd done it before. I must have watched that clip a dozen times trying to make it make sense, trying to convince myself it was someone else or that I was misreading it. But no, it was him. And the weirdest part? He didn't take anything. He stayed inside for maybe 5 minutes. Then he came out, the same way he went in, disappeared around the back, slipping through a gap in the fence that separated our yards. The next morning in daylight, I went to check the spot. Sure enough, a couple of the wooden slats near the bottom of the garage siding had been pried loose, just enough for someone to crawl through. That was the moment when my vague discomfort snapped into full-on dread. I should have called the cops right then. I know that now. But back then, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if he was just some confused old man looking for something he thought was his? Maybe he used to own the place. Maybe he thought it was still his garage. I didn't want to be that neighbor, the new guy stirring up trouble. So instead, I printed a freeze frame from the footage, stapled it to a piece of cardboard, and hid it in my bedroom drawer. And inside the garage, I left a note. Just a piece of paper taped to the tool chest. I know someone's been in here, it's on camera. I figured that would be enough. A warning, something to make him stop. And for a few nights, it did seem to work. No more strange lights, no new disturbances. I started sleeping a little better, until the following Monday. I got home from work around 6, groceries in hand, walked around the back like I always did, and froze. The garage door was wide open, not unlocked, open, like someone wanted me to see it. I rushed into the garage, heart pounding, and immediately knew something was wrong. The place was trashed. Shelves had been knocked over, tools scattered across the concrete like someone had thrown a tantrum or was frantically searching for something. A blue tarp had been ripped off an old cabinet I hadn't touched in months, and its doors were hanging open, empty. But it didn't feel like a robbery. Nothing valuable was taken. Just chaos. Like whoever had been in there wasn't looking to steal but to find something. Or worse, like they'd lost control in the middle of doing it. That same heavy, crawling feeling crept back up my spine, the one I'd felt when I watched the footage. But this time there was something new. In the back corner of the garage, near the spot where the siding had been loosened, there was a small pile of cigarette butts, 6 or 7 of them, nestled in a little blackened circle, as if someone had been sitting there, waiting. That was it. That was the moment I stopped making excuses for Gary. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them everything. The footage, the cigarette pile, the loose fence slats, even the bent nails at the back panel. I expected skepticism, Maybe a quick note and a promise to look into it. But to my surprise, they took it seriously. Very seriously. They asked if I'd had any conflicts with my neighbor, any reason to believe he might target me. I shook my head. No, nothing. Gary's quiet. I barely hear a sound through the wall. We barely speak. One of the officers looked at me and asked, "Would you be willing to let us set up a sting?" I hesitated. A sting? Just keep things the way they are. Let the camera run. We'll keep eyes on it. If he comes back, we move in. I told them they could do whatever they wanted, as long as I didn't have to stay there during it. That night I packed a bag and crashed at my buddy Trevor's place across town. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept picturing myself walking into that garage on any other night. What if he'd been in there already, hiding behind the cabinet, waiting for me to flip the switch and shut the door? 2 nights later, at 2:40 a.m., the camera caught him again. Same slow approach. Same path. He crept along the side of the garage like he was walking a line he'd rehearsed. But this time, he didn't go straight in. He crouched by the corner and just watched the garage door, waiting, studying. After a couple minutes, he moved toward the loosened panel again, started adjusting it like he was fine-tuning his entry point. His hands were methodical, like he'd done this before. That's when the squad car rolled up. No lights, no sirens. Just 2 officers moving fast through the side yard. Gary tried to dart back through the fence, but they grabbed him before he could get far. What they found on him made my blood run cold. A large hunting knife, a bundle of zip ties, and a pair of black gloves shoved into the inside pocket of his coat. They searched the area behind the fence in daylight. Just a few feet from where he was caught, hidden in some weeds, they found a black duffel bag. Inside, a roll of duct tape, a flashlight, and a small bottle of pills. Prescription unknown. That was when it became clear. He hadn't been trying to steal my tools. Later, one of the detectives walked me through their theory. The way he had loosened the garage panel weeks before. The cigarette butts. The fact that he'd come back at different times, like he was studying my schedule. It all pointed to something far worse than petty theft. He was planning to ambush you, the officer said quietly. Probably waiting for the right night, for you to come home late just like you do most days. It wasn't random. And the worst part? I'd been right there, feet away from a man who had been preparing, planning to hurt me. Maybe worse. And I'd ignored the signs, the light turning on, the drawer I didn't remember opening, that lingering sense I sometimes had while crossing the yard, like eyes were on me. I brushed all of it off. Gary was charged with attempted burglary and possession of a weapon with intent to harm. They didn't have quite enough for attempted murder, but the DA said they were pushing for the maximum sentence. I never saw him again. After the arrest, his side of the duplex sat empty for a few weeks before someone finally came and boarded it up. I broke my lease not long after that. Didn't even bother packing everything, I just wanted out. Now I live in a condo. Underground parking, keycard entry, multiple cameras. I check every one of them before bed. Twice. I still have that screenshot. The one of Gary crouched in the shadows by the garage, sliding inside like he belonged there. It's in my desk drawer. I don't keep it to scare myself. I keep it to remind me. People ask sometimes why I didn't catch on sooner, why I wasn't more aware. But here's the truth. Horror doesn't always look like a monster or a masked figure in the dark. Sometimes, it's the quiet neighbor with a soft smile, the one who tips his cap while watering his lawn, the one who nods politely when you pass, the one waiting for the moment you stop paying attention. I've never really been the type to post on forums like this, but what happened a few months ago still won't leave my head. I think I just need to get it out. I live in Salt Lake City, in a gated apartment complex that always felt pretty secure. Keypad entry, cameras, neighbors who mostly keep to themselves. I moved in after my divorce, just trying to start over. Honestly, I liked how quiet it was. Peaceful, low drama. The building has a shared laundry room in the basement. You can only get in with a separate key, and it's not creepy or anything, just kind of dim and stale, the way most old basements are. I usually avoided going down there at night, not because I was scared or anything, just, I don't know. Something about it always made me uneasy when the sun went down. That night, though, I was out of clean clothes and didn't have much of a choice. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I grabbed my laundry basket and headed downstairs. The hallway lights were still on, casting that dull yellow glow down the concrete walls. But when I got to the laundry room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked enough to show it hadn't latched all the way. That wasn't unheard of. People forget to close it properly all the time. I pushed it open slowly, and the first thing that hit me was the dark. All the overhead lights were off, but I could hear two machines running, the low hum and occasional thud of the cycle shifting. It made me pause in the doorway. Maybe someone had already started their laundry and just gone back upstairs. I reached for the switch, flicked it on. Nothing. No light. I sighed, assuming the bulb had gone out or maybe the switch was faulty. Either way, I wasn't about to bother maintenance just for one load of laundry. I turned on my phone flashlight, the cold white glow cutting through the dark, and stepped inside. I set my basket down and started tossing clothes into one of the washers. The room felt off. Not scary exactly, just wrong in a way I couldn't put my finger on. Too quiet, except for the machines, and colder than usual. Like a draft was blowing in from somewhere, even though the windows down there don't open. I hurried through it, just wanting to finish and get back upstairs. I slammed the washer door shut, reached to add detergent, and froze. There was someone standing in the doorway. A man. Just standing there, completely still. Not a sound. I nearly dropped my phone. It was the guy from the unit directly above mine. I didn't know his name. Never had a conversation with him. But I'd seen him a few times. Walking his dog, smoking on his balcony. He always gave off this odd vibe. Not threatening, just off. Twitchy. Distant. Now he was just standing there, watching me. His face was blank. His eyes locked on me. Not like I'd startled him. Not like he was confused about why I was there. He was looking at me like he'd been waiting. My skin prickled all over. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. So I did the first thing I could think of. I pretended to be on the phone. "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm just grabbing my laundry. I'll be up in a sec," I said loud enough for him to hear, holding my phone to my ear. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I muttered, "Excuse me," and forced myself to walk past him. Too quickly, probably, and back out into the hallway. I didn't run, but I was close. I didn't look back until I reached my apartment door. When I did, the hallway was empty. Once I was inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart hammering in my chest. I stood there for a long minute, trying to catch my breath. "What the hell was that?" I whispered to myself. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd startled him. Maybe he'd just come down to check his laundry. But the machines were already running when I got there. And he didn't have anything with him. No laundry basket, no phone, no keys. Just him, standing silently in the dark. The more I thought about it, the worse it felt. Something was off. Deeply off. I even went to my window and waited to see if he'd come out of the basement. He never did. That whole night, I barely slept. Every little creak or thump from the ceiling made me jump. I kept thinking about that stare. Not curious, not surprised, just watching. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I was being dramatic. Maybe I was just stressed. Maybe the divorce and being alone had me on edge. I went back downstairs to switch my laundry like nothing had happened. He wasn't there. Everything seemed normal, but that feeling never really went away. After that night, I started doing laundry only during the day, even if it meant rearranging my work schedule. I didn't care. I wasn't going back down there after dark. One afternoon at work, I brought it up to a coworker who also lived in the complex, just casually, like, "Hey, do you ever get weird vibes from that basement laundry room?" She laughed. "It's creepy as hell down there, but nothing's ever happened," she said with a shrug. "It's just old." I let it go, didn't push the topic. But after that, I started locking my door religiously, even during the day. I stopped using my balcony too. I didn't want to risk running into him again. Just the idea of seeing him out there, smoking and staring like before, made my stomach twist. 2 days later, everything changed. There were cops all over the building. I saw flashing lights through the blinds and pulled them open just in time to watch them escort someone out in handcuffs. At first, I didn't recognize him. His head was down. Then he looked up for a second and it hit me. It was him, my upstairs neighbor, the same man who'd been standing silently in the laundry room doorway. I felt sick. I didn't even know what had happened yet, but my gut was already tying itself into knots. Later that day, I went out and overheard a group of tenants talking near the mailboxes. One of them, a woman from the next building over, told me a girl had been attacked that morning, in the laundry room, same one I'd been in. She was okay, shaken but alive. She'd gone down early, around 6 a.m., and he was waiting down there, hiding. She fought him off and ran upstairs for help. That could have been me. When more details came out, it got worse. So much worse. He wasn't even supposed to be living in the building. The unit he was staying in had been marked vacant in the system. No lease, no record. Somehow, he'd slipped through the cracks and had been living there for months. No one knew how he got in. No one knew how he was paying for anything. But he'd been watching people. Maintenance found a hole, drilled clean through the floor of his apartment, directly above the laundry room. A peephole. He had been crouching there, watching. Just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. The image of him kneeling on that floor, staring through that hole in the dark, waiting for someone to come down alone. It's something I still can't shake. It makes my throat tighten every time I let myself picture it. And I keep thinking, if I hadn't faked that phone call, if I'd frozen, if I'd said nothing, if I hadn't walked away as fast as I did, what would have happened? He didn't say a single word that night, not one. Just that blank, locked-on stare, like I was already part of something, already inside the trap. It didn't feel like a guy caught off guard. It felt like a plan that had already started, and I got out before it finished. That's what messes with me the most. People always imagine danger being loud, yelling, breaking glass, footsteps pounding behind you. But this was silent, slow, intentional, like I'd walked into a scene that had been set just for me, and I barely got out in time. The police never gave us many details, just that he had a record, mostly trespassing, one older assault charge. Nothing that screamed serial predator, but enough to make you wonder how many other times he'd gotten close, how many other people he'd watched. After he was arrested, neighbors started sharing stories. Weird things we'd all brushed off. Clothes missing from dryers, lights that didn't work, doors left open. All the little things that seemed like nothing until they weren't. Looking back, it felt like he was testing the waters, seeing how much he could get away with before going further. That's what scares me the most. How easy it is to overlook warning signs when they're wrapped in everyday life. When they're quiet. When no one screams. I moved out a month later. I didn't care that he was gone. I couldn't stay there. Every creak from the ceiling above me made my chest tighten. I started avoiding any shared space. The mailroom, the trash chute, even the parking lot. I still live in Salt Lake, but my new place has in-unit laundry. That was non-negotiable. And no basements. Ever again. Even now, I catch myself checking over my shoulder in stairwells and parking garages. That kind of fear doesn't just leave. It settles in you, gets into your muscle memory. You don't even realize how tense you are until you're somewhere safe. And that doesn't happen often anymore. Not really. And the weirdest part? After everything that happened, part of me still wonders what he was doing that night in the laundry room. Just standing there in the dark. Why didn't he do anything? Was I too early? Did I interrupt something? Was he waiting for someone else? I'll never know. The police never told us much. He never said a single word. Not when they arrested him. Not in court. Nothing. That's what haunts me. How it all just stopped. Like whatever was supposed to happen didn't. Like I escaped it by inches. But it was close. Way too close.